instructions to me and to the defense as well, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Have you looked at those things over?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is there any errors now that you know of?
No, sir.
Okay, and we'll have another final chance to make sure everything is good before we go further. Is there anything either side wants me to bring up with the jury before we start?
No, sir, but the defense plans on moving some evidence into the record. So there's a photograph that I'm going to have the court read a stipulation for.
Okay,
So you may need to read the stipulation instruction and then the actual stipulation to evidence.
all right. Is there any objection to that?
No, Your Honor.
Can you pass me the stipulation instruction I read the other day?
I'm going to do this after you check.
Thank you. All right, so you want obviously just the first part of the instruction read, because the other part of the stipulation instruction that we read before actually has what you stipulated to last time.
Right, so just that first part, and then after I introduce the stipulation into evidence, you can give it to the court, and then the court can read that.
Do you have the stipulation?
Yes, sir, it's with the clerk, because it hasn't been entered yet.
I see it. Yeah, thank you. All right. This is going to be defense E. So it's appropriate time. You can do that. Sounds like there's going to be no objection to it. Anything else anyone wants to bring up before we go forward?
No, sir.
All right.
Yes,
What-
sir.
Yes or no? No? Okay. What I'm going to do, when, before probably closing arguments, wherever that's going to be, I had the clerk number the jurors, give them each a number, okay? And y'all are welcome to look at the list of juror numbers. If you want to have it here, you can take a look at it. I'm going to instruct them that if they have any questions that are sent back to us, that it be done by number. Instead of signing it, they would put, juror number 2, 3, 4, whatever it may be. Of course, the verdict form would have to be signed by the foreperson, and I'll instruct them not to use a number for that. And then if they're polled after the verdict, I'll have them polled by number. And then the clerk has a record. I believe we've sent you a record of
Yes.
the jurors and the numbers. I can have you, each of you want to take a look at the numbers here. Take a look at them and make sure. So, and then I'll give each of them a slip of paper telling them what their number is.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And if I forget, remind me to tell them this before we start.
Yes, sir.
A lot of things going on at one time. So we're ready for the jurors. I see Miss Lawrence is here again. And we're ready for the jurors. Let's bring it back, please. to remind the cameraman, please don't catch the jurors in any of your photos or video, okay? Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. As I've done each morning, I'm going to ask you the same questions, okay? By show of hands, have any of you discussed this case with anyone? I see no hands. Have any of you had anyone discuss this case or contact you about this case? I see no hands. Has anyone discussed this case in your presence? I see no hands. Have any of you gone online and looked up anything about this case or communicated online with anybody about this case? Again, I see no hands. I appreciate that. We are ready for our next witness.
Judge, at this time, the defense will move into evidence where the pre-marked identification purposes only as defense exhibit J and defense 1. These are medical records from Susan Lawrence from Care First Imaging.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
That objection, defense J, will be in evidence as defense number 1. You said it's medical records
Yes, sir.
of Miss Lawrence.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
The defense will move into evidence what has been pre-marked for identification purposes only as defense 8 as defense 2. These are Susan Lawrence's medical records from the HCA Florida Ocala Hospital.
No objection.
That objection, they'll be in evidence as defense number 2.
The defense will move into evidence what has been pre-marked as defense I as defense 3. These are medical records of Susan Lawrence on Doyle Phillips, NP.
Any objection? No objection.
No, Your Honor.
That will be in evidence as defense number 3.
The defense will move in what has been pre-marked as defense A as defense 4. These are
1 second. I thought we already had defense A.
A, but it's not been moved in.
What is number 2? What was that?
It was H.
H. Okay, I heard it wrong.
Okay, so this is going to go in as defense 4. These are photographs taken from Dr. Miller,
No objection.
The objection, defense A, will be in evidence as defense number 4.
The defense will move into evidence what has been pre-marked as defense B as defense 5. These are photographs taken
B, like Bravo? Okay.
by Taylor Paxton.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
The objection, defense B, will be in evidence as as defense number 5.
The defense will move into evidence what has been pre-marked as defense C as defense 6. This is the letter that Susan Lawrence wrote during her interview with Detective Pinker.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Defense C will be in evidence as defense number 6.
The defense will move into evidence what has been pre-marked as defense D as defense 7. photograph of Advocate Owens.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Defense D and Delta will be in evidence as defense number 7.
And Judge, the last one, defense E as defense 8, this is a photo stipulation. So it asks the court for permission to publish the photograph of Ms. Owens and then read the photo stipulation.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Defense E will be in evidence as defense number 8. If you can listen carefully, ladies and gentlemen. A stipulation. When parties agree that certain facts are true, that is called a stipulation of fact. You must accept stipulated facts as having been proven. However, the significance of these facts, as with all facts, is for you to decide. In this case, the stipulated facts that you must accept as true are. Now I need a stipulation. Photo stipulation. The state and the defendant have stipulated that the photograph of Advocate Owens entered into evidence by the defense was taken by Susan Lawrence on February 25th, 2022.
Permission to publish?
This is defense number 8. Yes, ma'am? Thank you. Ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. We'll call Joshua Wright.
Raise your right hand for me. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Please tell us your full name.
My name is Josh Wright. That's W-R-I-G-H-T.
And please tell us how you are currently employed.
I have my own private practice.
Doing what?
I'm an expert witness in forensic ballistics.
And how long have you been in private practice?
Approximately 11 years.
And where is your practice?
I'm based out of Asheville, North Carolina, but I testify all over the country.
Did you just fly in from Asheville yesterday?
Yes, I did.
How's the weather in Asheville?
It's
Cooler than
nice.
here?
Yes, cooler than here.
How were you employed prior to private practice?
I worked with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for approximately 9 years.
And what did you do with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
I first got hired on as a crime lab technician in the evidence section. So there we brought in evidence from the 13 surrounding counties, and I would import that evidence to the vault. After working there for about a year, I got promoted to a forensic technologist in the latent print and photography section. So there I was assisting the latent print section. Anytime they would develop a print on a piece of evidence, I would photograph it, and then I would dodge and burn and try to develop that print so they could use it for comparison purposes. And during that time, I also became a crime lab technician, a forensic technician in the crime scene unit, and went through 6 months of training there and assisted crime scene on hundreds of crime scenes and went to autopsies. And then I was promoted to a crime lab analyst in the firearms section, and I went through a 2-year training program, but essentially firearms, we were examining firearms for proper function. We would examine fired ammunition components such as bullets and cartridge cases to determine whether they came from a particular firearm. And that's what I did up until the time that I left FDLE on my own accord. And I also continued doing crime scene during that whole time as well.
Will you please go over your educational background for us?
Yeah, I have a degree in criminology, a Bachelor of Science degree in criminology from Florida State University. And because there was no degree in forensic science at that time, I did get my training from FDLE. But at Florida State, it was a criminology degree. That is what I received.
Okay. Will you please go over your training and experience and we'll go step by step. We'll start off with firearm identification.
Sure. So that's like an apprenticeship. When I got hired on into that section, it's a 2-year training program. And so we follow the guideline from the Association of Firearm Toolmark Examiners. And so starting off, I did a standardized coursework in the area of the history of firearms and ammunition development. I also did the history of the science, which is firearms identification. I then did some exercises with firearms and assembly and disassembly and learning how to figure out what was broken on a firearm so I could make it function so I could test fire that firearm. And so I disassembled dozens of firearms and put them back together. I also did comparative microscopy, so I examined hundreds and hundreds of bullets and cartridge cases to try to develop my eye to make a determination whether a specific bullet or cartridge case came from a particular firearm. I also received training from outside agencies such as the the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and from them I was taught gunshot residues and distance determination. I also received training from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives in serial number restoration. I also toured over a dozen firearm manufacturing plants in the northeastern United States and one ammunition powder plant, actually south of Tallahassee.
Okay, will you please go over your training experience in crime scene and shooting reconstruction? And let's start off, I know probably pretty self-explanatory in the title, but just to inform us, what is crime scene and shooting reconstruction in general?
Yeah, so you're reconstructing the crime scene. You're trying to determine the events that took place during a crime. And oftentimes guns are used, and so you would do shooting reconstruction. I did this while I was with FDLE on some cases, and then I've received training almost every year since I left FDLE, specifically in shooting incident reconstruction. And so you're trying to determine bullet path, shooter location, and the trajectory, which is the angle that the bullet took through a crime scene.
And ballistics in general, what is it?
I use it as an umbrella term. So the literal term for ballistics is the study of the bullet in flight. There's internal ballistics, which is how the bullet acts within the firearm. External ballistics is the study of the bullet in flight. And then terminal ballistics, which is the study of what happens to the projectile and an object that it hits. But in layman's terms, ballistics is used as kind of an umbrella term for any crime that involves a firearm. So that could be shooting reconstruction, gunshot residues, gunshot wounds, identifying bullets and cartridge cases back to guns, and just about anything that involves a firearm within a crime.
And do you have any further training and experience in ballistics that you haven't shared with the jury already?
No, just training that I've received from outside companies since I've gone private.
Do you belong to any professional associations?
Yes, I'm a member of the Association of Firearm and Toolmark Examiners and the International Association for Identification.
Have you ever testified or been qualified to give opinion testimony in the fields of, which we just spoke about, firearm identification, crime scene and shooting reconstruction, and ballistics in general?
Yes, I have.
And how many times?
94.
Do you testify for both the prosecution and defense?
Yes, I've worked with prosecution. I have 2 cases right now that I'm working with prosecution, and I work with defense majority of the time.
And in those 94 times that you've testified, have they been both for the prosecution and the defense?
Yes, they have.
Your Honor, we respectfully request for Mr. Wright to be allowed to give opinion testimony in the fields of firearm identification, crime scene and shooting reconstruction, and ballistics in general.
Any voir dire or objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right. I'll find that you can testify in a form of opinion in those stated fields.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Wright, did you look at the photographs of the crime scene and other documents in this specific case?
Yes, I did.
And what other documents did you review?
I reviewed an autopsy report and photos, I believe a deposition of the medical examiner, I reviewed crime scene photos, a crime scene report, and a video. I also reviewed some transcripts from witnesses and law enforcement officers.
Okay. What type of firearm evidence was found at the scene?
There was a Ruger LCP 22 and a Remington RM 380 model 380 caliber pistol. They were
And-
both pistols.
Yes, sir. And where were they found?
They were found in the bedroom.
Okay. Did CSI from the Marion County Sheriff's Office, crime scene investigators, did they do a trajectory analysis on the front door?
Yes, they did.
And can you tell the jury what is trajectory analysis?
So trajectory analysis is the analysis of the of objects that bullets struck during their flight through a crime scene. So we're trying to determine where the shooter was standing and what angle of impact was imparted on an object that a bullet passed through or into.
Do these tools need to be calibrated to ensure that they are functioning properly?
Yeah, so there's several tools that you would use to do this type of analysis. One is a trajectory rod, an angle finder, and a protractor. You also have laser or string that you can attach to the trajectory rod, calipers to measure the suspected bullet hole, and then tape measures. But of all those, what really needs to be calibrated is the laser, if a laser is used, the trajectory rod, and the angle finder. If it's a digital angle finder, then you need to calibrate that. Or
How would one calibrate the digital angle finder?
So an easy way to calibrate the angle finder is you can do it right there at the scene. So if you have a countertop, and that's not always present at every scene, so these things should be calibrated prior to leaving your agency. But if not, then you could do it right there at the scene, say on a countertop. If you have a flat surface, you can ensure that the reading on the angle finder is near zero or within those error rates of that particular model of angle finder. Same with the trajectory rod, much like a pull stick on a pool table, you would lay it down on a flat surface, roll that trajectory rod, make sure there's no wobble in that. If there's a wobble, that means the trajectory rod is bent, which can lead to bad results. And then as far as the laser, you could place the laser on a flat surface, such as a countertop, point it at a wall, mark that spot with, say, some painter's tape, pick the laser up, rotate it 45 degrees, set it back down, point it at the same spot on the wall, see if that's still hitting the tape, and then do another 45 degrees again, see if it's that laser beam is still hitting that same spot on the tape. And that way you can know it's calibrated and the laser is not pointing off in any direction.
And what happens when the digital angle finder, the trajectory rods, and the laser aren't calibrated properly?
Well, you just can't be sure of your angles, right? So your angles are going to be off, and error rate is already brought into play when you're doing trajectory analysis. That's what's called a cone of error. And so you have a 5-degree cone of error for every trajectory analysis you do. And if your instruments aren't calibrated, then your error rate might actually be bigger than that initial 5 degrees.
In this specific case, were the trajectory rods, the digital angle finder, and the laser calibrated prior to conducting the trajectory analysis?
No, they were not.
What is the, and if I mispronounce this, I apologize, the azimuth or horizontal angle calculated in this case?
So there's two angles that you're trying to find when you're doing trajectory analysis. One's a vertical angle, and that's the upward and downward angle. So if a bullet is traveling upward, then you're trying to determine at what degree and what angle it's traveling upward, or in this case, if it's traveling downward, you're trying to determine the degree of downward angle that it had before it impacted the door. Azimuth is the horizontal angle, so that's the left-right portion of the angle. And so we're trying to determine was the projectile going straight, slightly to the left, slightly to the right, and that's you would use a protractor to determine that.
And why is that important to do in trajectory analysis?
Well, because you want to get the whole picture, right? We're trying to recreate the scene and get the whole picture of what this bullet, how this bullet was acting when it impacted the surface of the door. So you want to just the the vertical angle was determined in this case, but the azimuth was not. And so to get the whole picture, you always want to photograph what angle, left or right, the bullet was impacting the door, or if it just was going straight in.
And was that done on this case?
It was not.
You spoke about error rates. I think you said there's a 5-degree cone of error in trajectory analysis.
Yes.
For those of us who aren't ballistic people, what does that mean?
So because trajectory is not an exact science, you have to imply a cone of error to this. So a lot of times, and maybe you'll see this in this case, the laser was used, and the laser is pointing back to a specific area. And to the untrained eye, maybe that you might look at that and think, okay, the person must have been standing right there because that's where the laser is pointing. But really, because the bullet hole is bigger than the trajectory rod, it has a larger diameter, there's play with that rod. And so studies that have been done by other experts in the field have found that there's usually, during training classes, they've tested their students, and they find that there's usually about a 5-degree error just if everybody lines it up, the trajectory rod, that they line it up and center it as much as they possibly can and do it as perfectly as they can, they still find that there's a 5-degree of error. And that's with a straight rod that's been calibrated. And so what you have to do to incorporate that the rod is straight is that there's little cones that you can kind of put in those holes and then put the rod through there, and that will help center that rod. But if the cones aren't placed in perfectly, then it can be off. And so what they found is that there's usually about a 5-degree range of error, and so they call it a cone of error, which would mean starting at the hole, it would go back kind of like a cone, and the further away you get from the object that was struck by the bullet, the bigger that cone of error becomes as it extrapolates out by 5 degrees.
So for lack of a better term, a perfect scenario, there would be a 5-degree cone of error in trajectory analysis.
Right, and the point is that we're not saying a person was standing in a specific spot. We can't do that. We can't be that accurate. And so really what you need to do is give an area. We're trying to determine an actual area because the science isn't that precise. So the 5-degree cone gives you an area where a person may have been standing.
And such as in this case, when everything isn't calibrated and done correctly, does that mean the cone of error gets even bigger?
Yes. In this case, the cone of error will be bigger, and that's also was determined by me because the angle finder was off by a whole degree on the same rod, and so we know that there's something going on either with the angle finder or the rod. On the inside, I believe it measured 7.8 degrees downward angle, and on the outside it was, I believe, 8.8 degrees, and I may have that backwards. But it was a full degree off, and so we know the tolerance of the angle finder is 0.1 degree, and so a full degree is out of calibration.
So in this case, what would the cone of error be? It's not 5%. What would it be?
It's really hard to say. I didn't have an opportunity to examine this door myself. It had been patched, and by the time I was involved, the door had been patched and the hole was patched, so I couldn't do my own. So it's hard to say without doing it myself. What I would extrapolate out, I think a reasonable is 10 degrees of error. Just double that 5 degrees, just because we don't know. We know that something was out of calibration. We just don't know exactly how much. It could have been more or less than 1 degree.
And from your testimony, it's clear that, in your opinion, the trajectory analysis in this case wasn't done correctly.
Correct.
What is ejection pattern analysis?
Ejection pattern analysis. So semi-automatic handguns are a type of handgun where they have an actuating top portion of the gun. This top portion, when the trigger is pulled, will move rearward under the pressures of the cartridge case and the bullet. An extractor will grab that side of that cartridge case head and it will pull it out. And as it pulls it out, there's a little extractor that will hit the bottom left side at like 7 o'clock on the cartridge case, and it will kick that cartridge case out of the firearm. About 80% of handguns will eject back into the right. Some handguns that are semi-automatic will have ejectors in different places. They'll have a firing pin that acts as an ejector, or the extractor will be at 12 o'clock, and so they may go straight up and back. But firearms that have an extractor at 3 o'clock and an ejector at 7 o'clock, most of the time will eject back into the right. And if you have the right substrate and the right surface, such as carpet or sand or grass, those cartridge cases will land and they will pretty much stay where they land. And so you can get an idea of where a shooter was standing within a scene if you've got, a couple of shots, say 3 or 4 or 5 cartridge cases that are all in one area. Then you can make a pretty good determination that, again, it's going to be an area, right? We can't be specific, but we're going to know that the shooter was probably standing in a certain area.
Was ejection pattern analysis done by FDLE in this case on the Remington 380?
I don't believe it was done in this case by FDLE.
Now, the Remington 380 that I just spoke to you about, how does that firearm eject cartridge cases? Pretty much like every other one, or is it different?
Yeah, and that firearm had an extractor at 3 o'clock, an ejector at around 7 o'clock area, and so I would fully expect that to eject back into the right.
Did you do an ejection pattern analysis on this specific case, on this firearm?
I did not.
And why is that?
Well, for one, the location of the cartridge case, it was found on a countertop. I can't replicate that. I can't go to the scene and shoot live ammo, right, and try to replicate that with all the walls and countertops that are there. And it would be too costly to try and build that out and get exact measurements to do it at a different location. Secondly, the surface of the floor in this apartment or this domicile was tile. I don't think the cartridge case actually hit the floor, or else it probably wouldn't have ended up on the countertop. But with ejection pattern analysis, only soft surfaces can help with ejection pattern analysis. Hard surfaces, cartridge cases will actually bounce erratically, and they'll bounce left, they'll bounce right, and so they may initially go back into the right and then bounce back forward. On hard surfaces. So ejection pattern analysis pretty much goes out the window when you have a hard surface. But again, I just want to reiterate that in this case, the cartridge case was found on a countertop, so I can't be sure that it even hit the floor.
Since you did not do a ejection pattern analysis on the firearm in this specific case, can you still do a true shooting reconstruction?
Absolutely, yeah. I can look at the photos. A trajectory rod was placed into the door with a laser. There might be a bigger cone of error involved, but I still think it gives you a good idea of where the shooter was standing. I think the location of the physical evidence, the cartridge case, also helps determine that as well.
Gunnar, will we start the PowerPoint presentation?
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Wright, where was the cartridge case found?
It was found on the countertop in the kitchen.
Okay, and why is that important to you in your trajectory analysis and reconstruction of the scene?
Well, again, we have limitations within this dwelling, right? So the fact that the cartridge case is on the countertop can help me figure out where the shooter was standing, where Ms. Lawrence was standing in this scene.
Okay, considering where the cartridge casing was found, can you tell us where Ms. Lawrence was when she shot the firearm?
Yeah, it's my opinion that she was probably standing in front of that countertop, not in the kitchen, but yeah, maybe like in this photo here, near the table and chair. I would put her out, as far as I feel comfortable extending her out away from the kitchen and towards the door would probably be about 10 feet ejection pattern, especially 380 auto 9mm. They can eject upwards of 10 to possibly 12 feet. And so I would suspect that she was standing in front of the kitchen by the table and chair when she fired.
If she was standing in front of the kitchen, close to the little table and chair area, how did the cartridge casing end up in the kitchen area?
I think the most likely scenario would be that it bounced off that painting or that wall.
You're talking about this painting right here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would have likely bounced off that. It's hard to be 100% sure, but just knowing how cartridge cases act when they eject from a firearm, looking at the hole in the front door, and seeing that it doesn't have a lot of azimuth angle to it. It's pretty much, it looks like it went in at 90 degrees with a slightly downward angle. I think that she was probably facing that door, and so the cartridge case would have bounced or ejected back into the right and potentially off the wall onto the countertop is what I think would have happened.
And let's go to the next photo. And this is the painting that you're speaking of, right?
Yes.
And this is the table, the chair area that you said she was right next to or around?
Correct.
So would you say she was right around here or so?
Yeah, I would say that would make sense.
Based on where the cartridge casing was found in the kitchen area?
Correct.
Where was the bullet entrance located on the door?
I believe it was 4 feet and 4 inches off the ground, and I think it was 9 7/8 inches from the open edge of the door.
Okay, I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, it was about 4 feet 4 inches from the ground, high on the door, and then I believe it was about 9 7/8 inches in from the edge of the door. That is the open edge when you open the door.
Okay. And the entrance and exit of the hole were both the same distance away from the edge of the door?
Yes, from what I could tell from the photos, they look to be good photos, taken correctly. They look like they're about the same. I mean, I could be off by maybe less than 1/8 of an inch, just because it's a photo, so I can't be exact. But that's what it looks like to me. Is they look like they're about the same distance away from the edge of the door.
And the exit hole was below the entrance hole?
The exit hole was about 1/8 inch below the entrance hole, from what I could see in the photographs with the tape measure.
Is that significant to you?
No, that's not like a drastic downward angle. This hole is pretty round. It looks like it struck at about 90 degrees. Now, between 90 and 70 degrees, a hole is going to look round. It's not until you start getting at more acute angles that you really start seeing an oblong effect to a bullet hole. So this hole looks pretty round. So yeah, it looks like it went straight through.
And did the photographs look to be taken correctly?
Yes, for the most part, they're photographs. When you're doing crime scene, you want to really get down at eye level to a defect and take that picture. You don't want to be standing over the picture and looking down or looking up or to the side. You really want to just get straight on and photograph at 90-degree angle. And I believe, for the most part, that was done in this case.
What are gunshot residues?
Gunshot residues are partially burned and unburned gunpowder particles and lead residue and soot that comes out the end of a firearm when it's fired. These residues, much like a flashlight, if you put a flashlight to a wall, against a wall, and start moving back, that diameter of that light will get bigger and less dense, and these powder particles act the same way at different distances. Up close, you'll see a lot of soot and powder. As you get further away, the soot and powder pattern will grow larger in diameter and less dense.
In this specific case, were there any close range gunshot residue drop-offs?
I didn't see any residues in the photos, and I didn't see anywhere in the crime scene notes or report where they were mentioned.
And there weren't any present on the door?
Not that I could see.
Okay, and what does that tell you?
So this is just a way to do distance determination. So we know that soot drops off at about 18 inches, and a powder pattern will drop off around 3 feet. And so really what these residues can do is give you a distance away from an object, a distance from the muzzle, which is the end of the firearm, to an object.
So that tells you that in this specific case, that Miss Lawrence wasn't, based on what you've seen in the pictures, Miss Lawrence wasn't close to the door when she fired.
Right, and I wouldn't expect, just to clarify, a lot of powder to stick to a non-porous surface like this door, but soot would definitely be present if it was close. But powder may have a harder time sticking to the door. But again, if she was 3 feet from the door, the cartridge case wouldn't have landed on the countertop.
Were you able to do trajectory analysis on the bullet defect in the front door by looking at photographs?
Yes.
And how did you do that?
Copious photos were taken with a trajectory rod, with a laser on it, with measurements. So I can look at all of those, and it helps me get an idea of the angle that was the bullet was traveling when it struck the door.
Okay, and can you explain what this is, the photo that the jury is looking at currently?
Yes. So you have you're looking at the edge of the door. The door has been open, and you're looking at the edge. This is a trajectory rod that has been stuck through the hole that was produced by the bullet, and on either side of the door there, you have 2 black cones that helps to center that rod within that hole. And again, there's an error rate with that, right? We can't be sure that's perfectly centered, but those cones will help you. Otherwise, you have a rod just in a loose hole that will be way off and way out of whack. So those cones help center that rod, and what it does is it helps give us a visual of how much of a downward angle that bullet was traveling when it struck that door.
And where would it seem the bullet traveled from?
So the door was closed at the time of the shooting, and so the door, when you look back to where that bullet came from, it came from the kitchen area or that table and chair area.
And why didn't you look at the door yourself?
By the time I was involved in this case, the hole had been patched, and I believe the door had even been replaced.
Okay, and what is your opinion regarding where Miss Lawrence was when she fired that firearm?
Well, my opinion is I can't confirm or I mean I can't deny her story that she was by the table. I think the location of the cartridge case is consistent with that. I think the trajectory of the projectile through the door is also consistent with her being in front, facing that door. I think that the cartridge case limits how far or how close to that door she was. And so I would agree that she was probably back somewhere by the table and chairs. I think that's the correct area.
And how much distance would that be?
From the door?
Yes,
Or
sir.
from the kitchen? I believe that's, it looks to be over 10 feet from the door. So she was probably, looks like close to 15 feet, 12 to 15 feet.
And would that be consistent with what she told law enforcement?
I believe that is consistent with what she told law enforcement, yes.
Okay. Have you also taken a look at different pictures in regard to this case that were taken by CSI?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Have you taken a look at the picture of a wound on the deceased's hand, right hand?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And based on your education, training, and experience, was that wound caused by the projectile?
I can't say specifically it was caused by the projectile. I believe that wound occurred during this incident, and I believe what...
Your Honor, speculation outside the scope of expertise.
That's sustained.
Are all of your opinions that you have shared with the jury today within a reasonable degree of firearm identification, crime scene, and shooting reconstruction, and ballistics in general?
Yes.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Cross-examination, please.
Yes, sir. Or if I could see the TV screen again.
Are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Wright. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
Good. So just to understand the basic principle of your opinion, is that your opinion is the defendant fired this weapon closer to the kitchen table in her residence, correct?
I believe she was closer to the kitchen area and that table than she was to the door, correct?
Would you agree with the general principle, based on your analysis in this case, that the farther back the defendant was from her front door, the higher the gun would be, correct?
Well, it just depends on the trajectory and that cone of error. But yeah, the further, if you really back extrapolate, that cone doesn't just rise, but it also goes down and to the side. So it's going to have to be a pretty far way back to get outside that cone of error.
Correct. But you would agree generally that in that diagram you just saw, the defendant's firearm was up here, correct?
Yeah, and the last one, yeah, I believe she told the person who made that diagram that that's how she was holding the firearm.
And then, but you would agree, so the closer the defendant came to the door, the lower the firearm would be, correct?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Wright, I'm going to go over some questions for you. Show you states 49 here. Would you agree that, based on your analysis, the defendant did not fire from back here in this hallway area?
Correct. I would agree with that.
You would agree that the defendant did not fire from behind this kitchen counter at all? You would agree with that?
I would agree with that.
It's your opinion that the defendant fired from somewhere, I guess, like around here, or maybe even further back towards the kitchen?
Right. I can't be exact, but I think she was far enough back that that cartridge case would have landed on the countertop.
And you would agree that that's your opinion, but you did not visit the scene in this case, correct?
I did not.
You would agree that you did not inspect the gun used in this case, correct?
I did not.
And you would agree that you've never even fired the Remington 380 model that was used in this case, correct?
I do not believe I've ever fired an RM380 now.
And you would agree that you did not inspect the shell casing in this case?
I did not.
And you would agree that you did not do any testing of the physical evidence in this case?
Yeah, I didn't examine any evidence in this case, except for the photographs and the visualizations I was given and the reports.
And you make a statement about there's being an angle difference, and you say that that angle difference raised some concern in your mind, correct?
That's correct.
But there was a projectile fired from the gun, correct?
That's correct.
And that projectile is metal and it's going through a metal door, correct?
That is correct.
So there would be some damage caused on the metal door by another piece of metal going through it at a pretty high speed, correct?
You mean like a hole?
Correct.
Yes.
And then the edges of that hole could have different bends, angles, correct?
You mean as they peel out away?
Correct.
Sure.
Okay. And that could affect the angle
Of the bullet?
of the angle finding that was done in this case of the trajectory.
Well, that's why you use the cones. The cones help to center that rod, so the rod shouldn't be touching any of those
Correct.
little bends of metal.
And the cones were used in this case, correct?
The cones were used to center that rod, yes.
Now, you talk about the shell casing, specifically this shell casing in States 48, and you would agree that the location of this shell casing was a factor in your opinion of determining the defendant's location in the house when she shot.
Yes, I think it binds her closer to the kitchen.
So this is a very important factor in your decision.
Yeah, physical evidence is always going to be important consideration.
And you talked a little about ejection pattern analysis, and you didn't do an ejection pattern analysis, did you?
No, ejection pattern analysis was not done in this case.
And this type of testing, I know you mentioned stuff about hard surfaces, but this type of testing can be helpful in determining where a person fired a gun from, correct?
It can if you have carpet or sand, or if it's an outside scene, sand and grass. Inside, it would need to be carpet.
And generally, firing a gun doing an ejection pattern analysis would at least help you determine how far a casing would even eject from a firearm, correct?
Sure, but I've fired hundreds of firearms. I've done ejection pattern analysis hundreds of times. I'm pretty familiar with how the limitations of that caliber, which is 380 auto. You're not going to see a 380 a pistol extract and eject a cartridge case and throw it 20 feet. So there's going to be a range. Usually it's around 10 to 12 feet at the most.
Excuse me. Just answer exactly the question as asked, okay? Next question, please.
Now, sir, you could have a ejection from a 380 pistol in this case. That would be less than 10 to 12 feet, correct?
Correct?
It could be even 3 feet, correct?
Correct?
And you have no idea what the ejection pattern is for this Remington 380 because you never even fired one before, correct?
All I know is that it ejects back into the right.
Thank you. Now, it's your opinion that, again, the defendant fired from somewhere around here, correct?
Correct.
Maybe further back. And then you say that this shell casing from this Remington 380 firearm, which you don't even know how far it even ejects from this firearm, goes back and either hits this wall or hits this painting. The canvas would be softer than drywall, correct?
I would assume so, yes.
So then it hits this somewhere over here, and then somehow does not bounce straight and to the right. It then somehow goes back into the kitchen, and then takes a hard right hand turn, and then somehow ducks underneath this cabinet right here, and goes just far enough back to avoid this lower part of the cabinet right here, and then somehow avoids this tall red spray can, and then avoids this blue can right here, and hits a very hard surface, correct?
Correct?
And just lays flat right there by the onion. So that's what you want the jury to believe?
Well, I think that's the best possible scenario. I don't know how else the cartridge case makes it up onto the countertop. So assuming that cartridge case landed there after being ejected from the firearm, I think she has to be close enough to the kitchen for it to get there. Exactly the path it takes, I can't be 100% positive. All I can say is that that we know there was no intervening object between her and the door. So she didn't fire through the cabinets, right? She wasn't in the kitchen firing through the cabinets whenever that cartridge case ejects out.
I would expect the witness to...
Yes, sir. Just make sure you listen carefully to the question and just answer the question as asked, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So you would agree that it's very hard to tell exactly where a gun was fired just looking at shell casings, correct?
I think it gives you an idea, but it's not an exact science.
And it's important to consider the circumstances around the shooting when trying to determine where a gun was fired, correct?
Such as?
Just the circumstance of the shooting, like, try to gather the information of the crime scene, correct?
You mean the trajectory?
Trajectory, just the evidence of the crime scene, or any evidence of the crime scene that you can have or review, correct?
Yeah, all physical evidence should be looked at within the crime scene, at every crime scene.
And you believe it's important to explore different possibilities of how a casing may have ended up where it did, correct?
Absolutely.
All right. And you never looked into the possibility that the defendant could have picked up the shell casing and put it on the table, correct?
Correct. I never read anywhere that was done by the defendant or by crime scene or officers at the scene. Nobody mentioned picking up the cartridge case and placing it on the counter. That would be abnormal for any of those people to do that. I've never seen law enforcement or crime scene move
Your Honor, I
evidence
would
around.
instruct the witness to be responsible.
I think he's trying to answer your question.
Now, Mr. Wright, so you believe, again, the defendant is kind of either back here or further back when she fired the gun, correct?
I cannot deny that she may have been in that area.
And the defendant about 5 feet 5 inches tall, you believe?
I believe so, yeah.
And so the bullet hole in the door was about 13, and the interior side of the door was about 13 inches below the top of the defendant's head then, correct?
Yeah, I think I had 11 inches.
You sure about that?
I believe I measured the hole in the photos was at 4 feet 4 inches, and she's 5 feet 5 inches.
5 feet 5 inches?
Yeah,
So that's about
yeah, foot and 1 inch. Yeah, 13 inches.
13 inches, okay. So if the gun barrel is about 13 inches below someone's head, it would kind of put the gun in kind of the middle or top of their chest area, correct?
If they're standing right up next to the door, yes.
And again, we went back to the principle that we talked about at the beginning, where the closer the defendant is to the door, the lower the gun would be, based on even your analysis of the scene, correct?
Correct. As you just mentioned, if she was right at the door, it would be 13 inches below the top of the head. So,
And you would agree that gunshot residue cannot always be seen with the naked eye, correct?
there's chemicals that are used to help develop the lead that turns it purple, such as sodium uridizinate, that can help you view the gunpowder. Yes,
So your answer would be yes, you cannot always view it with the naked eye, correct?
correct.
And you would agree that it's possible that faint gunshot residues could be hidden even on white doors, correct?
Possibly, yes.
And I believe you said the drop-off rate for soot, which is important for this type of door, correct?
Correct.
Is about 18 inches.
Correct.
So the defendant could have been 2 feet or even a little less than 2 feet from the door, and no gunshot residue could have been, no gunshot soot could have been found on the door, correct?
Correct, which is why you have to use other physical evidence to help determine where she was.
And then, so if the defendant is back here, or further back, when she fired the pistol, then I think from that diagram, the gun would probably have been above her eyes, correct?
It just depends on the cone of error. Again, we have an error rate here. We know something was out of calibration, which makes the cone of error 10 degrees. So I'm not sure how she was holding the gun. I just know that being back by the table, she would be within that cone.
And you agree that there's no obstacle, no big piece of furniture, anything like that between the defendant and the door that she would have to shoot over, correct?
Correct.
And you're familiar with sights on a gun?
I am.
And sights on a gun are usually designed to be kind of at eye level
If you're going to use the sights, then yes, you'd put them at eye level.
and not above your head, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Wright, you're being paid for your work in this case, correct?
Of course, yes.
About $250 an hour?
That's correct.
And how many hours are you at right now?
I believe I'm right around 32 hours.
Thank you so much. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, sir, thank you. Mr. Wright, how many firearms have you fired in your career?
Probably thousands.
How many times, do you think?
How many times have I fired those thousands of firearms?
Yes.
Tens of thousands.
How many different firearms have you fired in order to do an ejection pattern analysis?
Hundreds.
How many times have you done in your work ejection pattern analysis?
Just through training and through cases, I've probably done, over 100, 200. It's hard to say.
Mr. Smith, the prosecutor, asked you if you had ever done or fired a Remington 380, and I believe your answer was no, right?
Correct.
Based on your education, your training, and experience, would you expect doing an ejection pattern analysis on a Remington 380 to be any different than the other thousands that you've done?
I do not.
And why is that?
Because the extractor and ejector are in the same location as most semi-automatic firearms, which is at 3 o'clock and around 7 o'clock, and they eject back into the right.
So does it, in your opinion, expert opinion, does it matter whether you have done an ejection pattern analysis on environment team 380 in doing the analysis in this specific case?
No, it doesn't. I would expect it to eject back into the right.
Let's look at this photo. That Steve was asking questions about. Now, that green laser, what is that?
That's showing you where the trajectory rod is pointing where the bullet came from. It's giving a specific line of sight.
And by the trajectory, where's the trajectory rod?
It's in the door. It's the yellow line there.
And is this the trajectory rod that was not calibrated?
That's correct.
And is that the laser that was not calibrated?
That's correct.
And the fact that the laser wasn't calibrated and the rod wasn't calibrated as well, what does that tell you in regard to how deep or how reliable this analysis is?
Well, it could be off again by 5-10 degrees. So it's pointing, it's giving you a very specific area in which the bullet traveled from with that green line. Again, it's kind of a bad visual because what you really need to do is use a cone of error to give an area. And so if you had a cone going out from that laser up and down, then it would easily incorporate somebody standing by there, and it wouldn't, look like you'd have to be, 7 feet tall to have shot a bullet from back there. The fact that it could be out of calibration, if then there's just a chance that it's pointing way higher than it should be, and it could be more level. We just don't know because they weren't calibrated.
And you're supposed to calibrate it before each and every single case, right? Before any analysis that you do.
Yeah, so what I would do is, working at the lab, then we would probably calibrate quarterly, and then I would also calibrate again right before I use it.
And this is when you were working at Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
Correct.
And that standard operating procedure you have done as well in private practice?
Yes.
What have you gone over in regard to this case?
I've gone over the crime scene tech report, their photos, the video, the medical examiner's report, photos, deposition transcript, multiple law enforcement officers' narratives, multiple transcripts from Susan Lawrence herself and neighbors. I believe that was it.
In everything that you've gone over, has there been any mention at all that the the casing that was found on the kitchen counter was ever moved by anyone?
There was no mention of that, so it's not something that I can just assume happened.
Okay. Mr. Smith was asking you questions in regard to all the quote-unquote obstacles the casing had to go through in order to be found where it was found. Based on your education, training, and experience, is there any other way that, besides it being that casing could have been found where it was eventually found?
For me, it's the most likely way. Could there be another way? I don't know if I can rule out every possibility just because I don't know all the possibilities. I know there's a lot of stuff on that countertop. Could the cartridge case may have gone more back than to the right and somehow bounced under the countertop and then over that stuff? Possibly. That could have happened. That still puts her in the same position that I put her in. It still binds her to that closer to that kitchen than the door.
How does it bind her there?
Because of the limitations of the ejection of the cartridge case. Again, if she's all the way up by the door, say 2 feet from the door, a cartridge case couldn't possibly eject over 20 feet and then land, not only make it 20 feet, but then also land 3 feet off the ground at 20 feet, assuming that it would have gone even further had there been no obstacles. So I've never seen a handgun eject that distance.
How many trajectory analysis have you done in total in your career?
During my deposition, I think I said 50, which was a grossly understated amount. I'm probably closer to about 150 trajectory analysis, just through cases that haven't gone to trial. But I've probably testified on, probably close to 40 cases in trajectory analysis.
Mr. Smith was asking you about GSR possibly not seen by the naked eye. How frequently does that happen, that you can't see GSR?
Not super frequent. When I did more distance determination, we would do it on close. Really, on crime scenes, when if you want to determine if a bullet passed or something, then you would do sodium redizinate, and you would get a lead ring around a purple ring around the bullet hole, and you're just trying to confirm that that hole was caused by a bullet. You can also spray for residues on that as well. But normally, you're going to see residues. If residues were deposited on an item, it's rare to be just at that distance where it is just barely there and you don't see it.
And from the pictures, what color was that door?
It was white.
In your training experience and with your education, would the color of that door, if she would have been close enough to have gunshot residue on it, would you have seen it in the pictures?
It would have definitely been easier to see residues on a white door than say, a brown door or a darker color.
And going through all the police reports and all the depositions that you have reviewed, is there any mention of any gunshot residue being found on that door?
No, there isn't.
And since with your eye, with the pictures, you can't see any gunshot residue, and because there is no evidence of gunshot residue ever being found on that door, what does that tell you?
That she was likely not within range to deposit gunshot residue on that door.
And what is that range again?
For soot, it would be around 18 inches, and with powder drops off, powder pattern drops off at 3 feet, powder drops off altogether around 5 feet. But again, powder is not going to readily stick to a non-porous surface.
And all of that gunshot residue, etc., not being found on that door is consistent with her being close to that little table area and chairs, right?
Yes, I can't deny her version of the events that she was back by the table. I think the cartridge case location supports that. And the fact that there are no residues also supports that.
Based on your analysis of this case, is it possible that when Miss Lawrence shot the gun, that it was over her head like this?
I mean, I can't refute that. I don't know if she has training in firearms, if she knows how to shoot the guns, how scared somebody is can affect how they hold a gun. So that's not something that I would opine on is how somebody was holding the gun when they shot. I wasn't there, and I couldn't tell you.
But based on your training and experience in trajectory analysis, is that possible?
Hold on
Sure.
1 second. He just said he didn't have an opinion on it, so you can't ask him the same question.
Are all of the opinions that you have shared with the jury in court today within a reasonable degree of firearm identification, crime scene and shooting, reconstruction, and ballistics in general certainty?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, sir. Any additional questions?
No, Your Honor.
Is he excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Your Honor. You too.
We'll take a short break. 10 minutes or less. All right, thank you. All right, the door is closed, the jury's out of the courtroom. Who's got the next witness? Is it an expert? Please make sure you let him know that listening carefully to the question on both sides and just answer the questions that are asked. I don't allow people to just give their opinions on things that are outside of the question. So I don't want to have to admonish them in the middle. So I think it's better to let them know, hey, listen carefully to the question, answer the questions as asked. It's not a opportunity to give whatever you want to say. It's a question and answer period. Okay. The only reason I do the video is so I make sure no one doesn't accidentally put something up there.
Yes, sir. And I didn't mean to activate. I didn't
That's
realize
okay,
it. I was
yeah,
just trying to go back.
Yeah, I know. The problem is that the screen literally puts whatever's on your computer. So if you're not ready, whatever's on your computer is going to be in the whole quote room. So that's the problem.
I'll do better, Judge.
That's okay. I'm just letting you know how this thing works. It's not like basically it's just another computer screen. So if you get messages, whatever, on that screen, it's going to pop up there. It's like for all the world to see.
For all the words. That's the last thing we need.
All right, thank you. So we'll be taking a short recess.
Sorry, I didn't.
Stra, Terpstra.
Raise your right hand for me. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Have a seat, sir.
Good morning.
Morning.
Can you introduce yourself to the jury?
Yeah, my name is Toby Terpstra.
Can you spell your last name for us?
You bet. Terpstra.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a 3D forensic analyst.
And what is a 3D forensic analyst?
Yeah, so I work on a large variety of cases, but like a 3D forensic analyst, in general, they're analyzing environments in 3D and objects that are within the 3D environment and the relationships between those.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. So could be the measurements. So if this is our 3D environment, it could be the distance or average distance to the jury from, say, a monitor in this 3D environment. That distance might be important. Or I work on a lot of vehicle accident reconstruction cases. And from that standpoint, the positions of, say, like a vehicle over time could give us speeds for that vehicle. So a lot of different applications, really.
And do you work doing photogrammetry?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what that is?
Yeah, photogrammetry is really the art and science of being able to take reliable measurements from two-dimensional media. So whether that's a photograph or a video. So photographs and videos are often taken, maybe recording an event as it's occurring, or photographs afterwards of the event, right? And I guess simply put, or the way I like to describe it, is you can take that two-dimensional media and reassociate it to the three-dimensional environment, and that's what we call camera matching photogrammetry. And then from that standpoint, you can begin taking measurements of physical evidence that was captured or documented by the video or the photograph.
And I think before that you mentioned 3D site reconstruction or accident reconstruction. What is that?
Yeah, so one of my areas of expertise really is 3D site reconstruction, and that involves creating an environment that's accurate, based dimensionally on the location of elements or objects where they were when an incident occurred. So we're reconstructing that site and knowing exactly where different objects were in that environment. Oftentimes things change over time and they're no longer available for physical inspection. But if they're recorded again on that photograph or video, we can reconstruct the scene based on the original locations.
And do 3D forensic analysts do 3D visualizations?
Yeah, I do 3D visualizations as well. Yep.
And what is a 3D visualization?
So it's kind of a broad term, and it could encompass a lot of different things. It could be anything from just a two-dimensional graphic of a 3D model, right? Or it could encompass an interactive 3D environment, such as virtual reality or something like that. I would say in this case, A 3D visualization is more a reenactment of events as they occurred.
Is that kind of like a simulation, a computer simulation?
It could be. It could be also different from a simulation.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been working in your industry?
So about 20 years.
And what position do you currently hold?
So I'm a senior forensic visualization analyst, 3. Don't ask me what the 3 means. I don't know.
And what are your duties there?
I'm sorry?
What are your duties there?
So I'm responsible for helping to oversee our visualization department, guiding, directing, hiring, and then I do a lot of work with other experts. So ballistic experts, fire and cause origin experts, biomechanics, a lot of other people. As you can imagine, photogrammetry, which I was just describing, there's so much that's captured on video and photograph these days that it applies to a wide variety of disciplines. So I work with a lot of different experts trying to figure out and provide good information based on photographs and video.
What's your educational background?
Yeah, so in 2001, I received an Associate's of Applied Science from Westwood College of Technology in visual communication.
Do you hold any professional certifications?
Yes.
What?
So I have a Part 107 remote pilot license through the FAA, or the Federal Aviation Administration. I'm also a certified forensic video technician through LEVA, which is the Law Enforcement and Emergency Services Video Association.
And are there requirements to keep those certifications current?
Yes.
What are those?
So the FAA requires a recurrent test every couple of years for the remote pilot license, and then LEVA requires that I show 80 hours every 3 years of continued education in related fields. So,
Are you a member of any professional affiliations?
yes.
What are those, briefly?
So I regularly contribute to a lot of different organizations, attending conferences, and then presenting, publishing, reviewing manuscripts, as well as working to develop standards in different organizations. Some of those are the Society of Automotive Engineers, or SAE. I've been a member there since 2011. I'm also a member of IAFSM, the International Association of Forensic Security and Metrology, ASPRS, the American Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, ACER, ACSR, the Association of Crime Scene Reconstructionists, and then more recently I've been serving with OSAC, which is the Organization of Scientific Area Committees. It's actually administered through NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. And then I work, sorry for all the acronyms, I work for, I'm part of a subcommittee, so it's the Crime Scene Investigation and Reconstruction Subcommittee through OSAC, and then the Forensic Metrology Task Group. And one of the standards we're working on right now is developing a standard for the capture and processing of terrestrial LiDAR data.
So you mentioned, I think, teaching classes or being involved in the teaching of some of
Yeah,
these
I'm an
organizations?
instructor as well, yes.
Okay. What classes do you teach?
So I teach a couple of classes that are once a year or a couple times a year. One of those is through SAE, again, the Society of Automotive Engineers, and that one is ACTAR accredited. It is photogrammetry and digital media analysis. I've been teaching that one since 2017, so about 8 years. I also teach a basic laser scanning certification course through IAFSM, and then just this year, I taught a class that was also ACTAR certified for the International Forensic Photography Symposium, and that was on selecting imagery for camera matching photogrammetry.
You weren't getting lots of acronyms.
My apologies.
Have you authored any technical peer-reviewed publications?
Yes,
About how many?
about 20.
And in what areas were those publications?
Yeah, so really photogrammetry, video analysis, 3D site reconstruction, and 3D visualization.
Have you been allowed to offer opinions in a court of law before?
Yes,
Approximately how many times?
5,
And were those appearances in civil or criminal courts?
both.
And what subjects have you provided opinion testimony in court before?
Really the same, so again, photogrammetry, video analysis, 3D site reconstruction, and visualization.
Your Honor, I would ask that Mr. Terpstra be able to offer opinions in the area of photogrammetry, 3D analysis, and 3D visualization.
Any objection of voir dire?
No, Your Honor.
I'll allow him to testify and form an opinion in those fields.
When were you retained by defense counsel in this case?
It was October, I believe, 17th of 2023.
And do you work for free?
No,
What's your hourly rate?
it's 280.
And what were you asked to do in this case?
So in this case, I was asked to reconstruct the environment, again, including objects within the environment, and create 3D diagrams of the environment as it existed when the incident occurred. I also created visualization that includes a reenactment based on Ms. Lawrence's recollection of events.
And what case materials were provided to you?
So a lot of different case materials. I guess some of those include crime scene photographs, the crime scene report, photographs from the autopsy, as well as radiology images from the autopsy report, interviews, 911 call transcripts, depositions.
Specifically, were you given transcripts or videos of Ms. Lawrence's statements to law enforcement?
Yes.
And you said that you made a reenactment and you also recreated the scene, is that right?
Yeah, so we did a reconstruction of the scene and we also created a reenactment. Yes.
What did you have to do? What steps did you have to do to get there? Like, just as an overview.
Sure. So I started by reviewing some of those provided documents and then gathering some imagery myself, so publicly available aerial imagery. I also went to the scene and I met with Ms. Lawrence. I photographed and recorded LiDAR data of both the scene and of Ms. Lawrence. I then worked in a computer software, various computer software to process that data, including camera matching photogrammetry, and create an accurate three-dimensional model with diagrams of the environment, including the physical evidence at the scene. And then incorporating all of that, I created a 3D visualization, again, based on Ms. Lawrence's recollection of events from that day.
Did you also prepare a PowerPoint presentation?
I did.
Would the PowerPoint presentation assist you in explaining to the jury some of the work you did in this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I publish the PowerPoint?
Is there any objection?
No, Your Honor.
You ready to go?
It is. All right. So what is this?
So as I was referring to earlier, this is one of the aerial images I gathered. So this is from Nearmap, which is just publicly available aerial data. This is from November 5th, 2023. It shows the residence where the incident occurred from an aerial view. You can see it labeled there on kind of the bottom left with the address 1662.
And this?
This is a street view image this is Google Street View, if you're familiar. You can see the residence essentially centered in this image.
How about this?
This is just a closer in view of that same image from Google Street View. This was recorded in May of 2023.
Now, you mentioned that you reviewed police photographs. Is that what's coming, or is that next in the
Yes.
PowerPoint? Okay.
Yeah, the provided photographs were from the police in this instance. So these photographs show the residents on the night of the incident, so the night that it occurred. You can see their photographs taken from various angles walking through the scene. This is Unit 3, and then you can see the doorway there to the residence at Unit 3. That is a bullet hole or a bullet defect on the exterior of the door. Here you can see that's been marked with an evidence label A for the exit of that bullet through the exterior of the door, and B for the entrance through the interior of the door. This is a photograph taken essentially from the front door looking towards the interior of Miss Lawrence's residence towards the kitchen.
And is that still one of the police photos?
Yes,
They're still on these?
that's correct. This is a photograph of the kitchen. We're kind of rotating around back towards the front door a little bit. On the countertop there, you can see there is a cartridge case marked with evidence placard number 1.
And that's is this a closer up shot?
Yes.
And what is this?
So this is a trajectory rod or a protrusion rod with centering cones that was placed in the door. So this is the same entrance and exit A and B that were marked in previous photographs. Now it has a trajectory rod in yellow there going through the door.
What is this?
This is a photograph of the inside of, again, the police photograph or a crime scene photograph, interior of Miss Lawrence's residence, that same yellow trajectory rod through the door, and now you see a laser trajectory has been, sorry, is there water? Can I grab a water from anybody? Apologize. So the laser has been added to the end of the trajectory rod, and so you can see it's, thank you, photographed there with a green laser in the environment.
Is that another photo of the green laser?
Yeah, so this is another photograph of that same laser. This one you can see the laser terminates on a wall above the cabinets there. Those are the kitchen cabinets.
Is this documentation that you received from the police?
Yeah, so this is a crime scene report. And there's a notation there. I'm just noting that they had documented 2 different angles with the laser or the inclinometer. The laser angle finder that they used was recorded at 7.8 and 8.8, so 2 different angular measurements.
What is this?
So this is photographs of the same. So here you can see 8.8 degrees measured vertically on the interior of the door and 7.8 on the exterior of the door. This is the front door and the door frame, including some damage, I think, in the second photograph here, to the door frame. For clarity, my understanding is that some of this damage was existing prior to the incident or prior to that evening.
Is that another photo of the pre-existing damage?
Yeah, so here you see the latch plates. It's a little bit closer in, but you can see the damage to the door frame there, yes.
All right. Did you go to the scene yourself?
I did.
And do you remember when that was?
Yes, it was on February 28th of this year.
And why did you do that?
So I went there to document the three-dimensional environment. So I used LiDAR technology, a 3D laser scanner, which takes really millions of individual 3D data points that I can take measurements from anywhere within the environment. I used that data to recreate a 3D model of the environment. I also took a number of photographs documenting the conditions of the residence, both the exterior and the interior, when I visited it.
May I approach the witness?
Yes, ma'am?
I am showing you what's been marked for identification as defense F. Can you take a look at that?
Yes,
Do you recognize that?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
These are a series of photographs that I took during my site inspection.
And you took those photos yourself?
That's correct.
Can you thumb through them and make sure you took all of those photos?
Yes,
And are they a fair and accurate depiction of the scene as you observed it on February 28th, 2024?
that's correct.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd move into evidence what's been pre-marked as defense F into evidence as defense 9.
Any objection?
If I could review them, Judge.
Sure. Any voir dire you want to do that? Defense F will be in evidence without objection as defense number 9.
All right. So you mentioned that you did you went to the site in February of 2024.
That's correct.
So that's a little bit after this incident happened.
Yes.
Is it your understanding that someone else was residing there at the time?
Yes.
Okay. So all this stuff, this isn't Miss Lawrence's?
This photograph that's on the screen right now is 1663 address, so this is actually across the street.
Oh,
but
okay.
the photographs, subsequent photographs of the residence where Miss Lawrence was residing, there's a different resident living in that residence now.
Gotcha. All right. So what is this?
So this is a photograph from across the street at that same address, looking towards Unit 3 or Miss Lawrence's residence.
I'm just going back, is this residence, is that where Miss Owens resided?
That's my understanding, yes.
1663. And then you said that was from the address that was just shown looking toward Miss Lawrence's residence, is that right?
Yeah. So the previous photograph was taken from approximately the same location. One is looking towards 1663. This one is looking towards Miss Lawrence's residence from across the street there.
What is this?
This is a sequence of images beginning near Miss Owens' residence there and walking towards Miss Lawrence's. So here we're crossing the street. Again, just a sequence of photographs.
What is this?
So this is Miss Lawrence's residence. There's a sidewalk leading up to Unit 3 there. Unit 3 there is marked on the fence posts there, if you can see it in the photograph. And then this is the front door to her residence. My understanding is that this door had been replaced. You'll note that there's no bullet hole or bullet defect in the panel of the door here in this photograph.
So this door is not the door that was involved in this case?
That's correct. My understanding is that door
Hold on one
was
second.
entirely
Just,
replaced.
listen to the question and the answer. Please don't offer stuff without a question being answered, okay?
Okay.
Next question, please.
What is this?
This is a photograph I took at the scene.
Is this the interior of the residence?
Yes.
Why is all the furniture different?
Well, it's different from the time of the incident because some time had passed and there is a new resident living there in that same space now. So new furniture, new decorations, or other things in the apartment, if you will.
What is the fancy equipment in that photo?
So that's a 3D laser scanner that uses LiDAR technology that I was referring to. This takes millions of 3D data points throughout the scene.
Is that yours?
That's correct.
And is it your understanding that this is kind of the area inside where Miss Lawrence's table and chairs used to be?
Yes.
Some more photos of the interior.
Yes.
And the countertops and all the walls, were they the same?
Yes. So there's tile, there's countertops, there's walls, there's a number of different elements to the interior of this residence that remain unchanged from time of incident to time of my inspection.
What is this?
This is another photograph from inside the residence. You see the Faro Focus scanner. So that, again, that's my scanner there in the foreground. It's looking towards the front door from the interior of the residence.
And what about this?
So this is a photograph of the door frame and the latch plates. You can see that they've been updated or changed since the time of incident.
All right. Now, I think you had mentioned previously something called LiDAR. Can you explain to the jury what LiDAR is?
Sure. LiDAR is a technology that basically the way the instrument works, and you may have seen these on a street corner with somebody with a tripod doing a land survey. It's very common technology for land surveys or surveyors to use. But basically the way LiDAR works is it's using what is typically infrared light or light that's just outside of the human visual spectrum, so we can't see the light. And what it's doing is it's using that light and recording from the point in time it leaves the instrument till when it hits an object and returns back to the instrument. And for the amount of time for that light to do that, as well as a horizontal and vertical angle. And based on that information, it's able to create 3D points. As I was mentioning, millions of those that really will define an area or an environment.
So do you use it to kind of map a 3D space?
Yes, I guess from my standpoint, it's 3D. LiDAR is not a new technology, but 3D scanners are fairly recent. And from my standpoint, there's really no better way to document and preserve physical evidence than using 3D laser scanning.
So is that, tell me, like, the LiDAR is an acronym, is that right?
That's right.
And what does it stand for?
Yep. So it's commonly accepted for light detection and ranging. It's really just a combination of two words, light and radar. But you can see that light detection and ranging also works as an acronym, and so that's been kind of more commonly accepted in the industry.
Can you tell me some examples of LiDAR?
Sure. So the image you just saw was created with aerial LiDAR, which is on the right here. I just talked previously about a total station. That's, again, one of those that you might see somebody on the street corner using with a tripod for land surveying. The instrument I used was a 3D laser scanner. The one I used at the scene is slightly different than the one you see in the photograph, but they're both Faro 3D scanners. That's just a manufacturer. There's also mobile scanning and aerial scanning. They're all using that same LiDAR technology.
What is this?
So this is just a quick example. This actually demonstrates a couple things. One, camera matching photogrammetry, which I used in this case, but the point cloud there that you see, or the LiDAR data. So when it's capturing those millions of 3D data points that define an environment, it's commonly referred to as a point cloud. So this is just a visual to help explain how that data is captured from an aerial standpoint. So you can see a plane flying over and recording that LiDAR.
And what is this?
This is the LiDAR that I captured there at the residence, so Miss Lawrence residence and the surrounding area. You can see on this image the number of points that were collected, so approximately 44 million 3D data points that define and describe that three-dimensional environment.
And how did you collect this?
So using that Faro Focus scanner, the premium scanner.
What is this?
This is just a closer view of it, so we're looking kind of from a top down at the neighborhood there. You can see some roofs, you can see the street, but these are individual 3D data points.
What about this?
And a little bit closer on that same point cloud, you can see the parking in front of Miss Lawrence's residence, which is shown essentially in the center of this image. This is image just a little bit closer.
Is this what looks like a fan blade, maybe? Is that the interior of the residence that Ms. Lawrence resided at?
That's correct.
And what is this?
So this is a perspective view or orthographic view. Sorry, this is not an orthographic, but rather a perspective view or an oblique view of the residence there, and we're kind of just rotating around it. These images help you understand, I suppose, that this is all captured in 3D and that we can view it from, because it's all in 3D, we can view it from any perspective or any angle.
And this is LiDAR data too?
That's correct.
What about this?
This is, again, the same point cloud of LiDAR data. You can see the residence there.
This?
The same. This is from a slightly different view. And now we're rotating around towards the front of the residence.
All right, there's a lot of LiDAR. What is this?
This is the view of Miss Lawrence's residence. You can see the same fence that was there in the photographs, and for Unit 3 there, which is right in the middle of this image.
How long does it take your fancy machine to gather all these little points?
I was probably there for a couple of hours, approximately.
What is this?
So this is that same 3D point cloud. The way the 3D scanner works is it'll also take photographs after it records the LiDAR data. So the grayscale images that you were looking at previously are based on the intensity of light returning to the scanner itself. And then this this digital image, I should say, of the point cloud now incorporates photographs from the scanner. So this is the RGB or red, green, blue data overlaid on top of that point cloud.
Is that a similar thing closer up?
Yes, so this is approaching Unit 3 from the exterior. Again, this is a 3D data point cloud.
What is this?
This is the front door of the residence. This is intensity data, again, so grayscale.
And what about this?
So this is the interior of the residence. This is the LiDAR data that was captured that is the same as it was at the time of the incident. So if it looks a little bit strange to you, that's because objects that were there during my inspection months after the incident occurred from a subsequent resident have been removed from this.
Is that what the blank space is, the white?
That's right. Yep.
Is that the same in this image? There's some things removed?
Yes, so this is just a little bit closer to the kitchen there, but you can see the walls, the cabinets there at the kitchen countertop, the floor, all of that is the same from time of incident to time of my inspection.
And what about this photo? Is that taken from the top?
Yeah, so this is an orthographic top view, so there's no perspective to it. Again, since it's all done within a three-dimensional environment, we can view it from any perspective. This is like a plan view. You might see something like this from an architect. So it's a straight-down plan view.
And all of those previous 10 or 15 photos you gathered when you went out to the site. Is that right?
So the images of the LiDAR scan data is all scan data that I gathered during my site inspection, correct?
I think you had previously mentioned photogrammetry. Can you tell the jury what photogrammetry is?
Sure. Photogrammetry, again, art and science of being able to take reliable measurements from two-dimensional media. There's I believe, a definition on this slide from the American Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, which maybe you'll find helpful, but it is a little bit more in depth.
And is this a demonstration of it?
Yeah, so this is a visualization I created that helps explain what photogrammetry is. This is based on research we did for the Society of Automotive Engineers. The idea was how accurate can we recreate a three-dimensional environment, in this case without visiting it, based on publicly available aerial LiDAR and aerial imagery. So what you're seeing right here is the combination of those two sources, aerial LiDAR and aerial imagery, and then we're surfacing that and creating an environment. And this part right here, what you see, what we're doing is we're solving for the camera's unique position, orientation, and field of view within that environment to where it matches. And then once we have that alignment or that camera match to the three-dimensional environment with the photograph, we can begin placing in pieces of physical evidence that are temporal in nature, that are no longer around for physical inspection, such as, in this case, the vehicle that you see, and then the pieces of blue, those crosshairs representing paint on the pavement.
So did you use photogrammetry in this case?
I did.
I'm gonna stop this. Okay. And so all that previously mentioned stuff, going to the site, reviewing all the crime scene photos, I think taking the LiDAR data, all of that is leading to the creation of a model, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And did you create a computer model of the environment for this case?
Yes.
And what information did you use to create that computer model?
So some of the information was what we're just walking through the LiDAR data that I collected during the site inspection. Because of the differences or the changes that had happened in the environment, I also used camera matching photogrammetry to locate where was the furniture, for instance, in that residence at the time of the incident, as well as the location of physical evidence as documented in these crime scene photographs.
And then when you're actually creating the model, are you using computer software?
That's correct.
And what kind of computer software did you use?
And so we're using, as I mentioned previously, Faro creates the scanner that I was using, the 3D laser scanner. I'm using Ferrocene to do the processing of that Autodesk recap to work with that point cloud and convert it into a format that I can use in Autodesk 3D Studio Max. I'm also using Autodesk AutoCAD to take dimensional measurements. Inside of 3D Studio Max, I'm using that for the camera matching photogrammetry. We also use other software for that as well.
Are those softwares and methodologies generally accepted in the incident reconstruction and 3D visualization communities?
Yes.
Did they create a fair and accurate representation of the incident site, including the furniture locations at the time of the incident and the physical evidence as documented by the officers shortly after the incident?
That's correct.
Did you also create a computer model of the parties involved in this incident, namely Ms. Lawrence and Ms. Owens?
Yes.
And are those computer models are they a fair and accurate representation of the clothing and the general body dimensions of those people in the time of the incident?
Yes.
What is this slide?
This is a photograph taken by the crime scene investigators shortly after incident. This is looking at the front of Miss Lawrence's residence with a private property sign there in the yard.
And then, what is this?
This is the same photograph. What we've done is we've done some enhancement, if you will, or clarification to this photograph. Basically, we're using levels to bring out some of the objects that are actually contained inside the photograph, but where it's really dark and difficult to see. For instance, now you can see the trunk of the tree on the left, and perhaps all the way to the left, just above the police vehicles, you can see the edge of another residence across the street.
And were you using the computer software that you just mentioned to do that?
These adjustments to the photograph would have been done in probably Adobe Photoshop.
What is this?
So this is that same LiDAR point cloud. This is a different way of looking at it from a colorization standpoint, but you can see represented here is the camera match, or the alignment that I've been referring to with the LiDAR point cloud to this two-dimensional photograph. So that same tree is visible, the same residence to the left side of the photograph, as well as Unit 3 right in the middle where Miss Lawrence was at the time of incident.
So are you taking photographs from the police and the stuff that you gathered from the LiDAR and putting it together so it's perfectly aligned?
That's correct. We're camera matching it, yes.
What is this?
So this just shows the placement of the property sign. Again, so this is a piece of physical evidence that was no longer there during my site inspection, but using camera matching photogrammetry, we can solve for the location. So where was that sign at the time of the incident?
And what is this?
This is that same point cloud with RGB or photo overlays on top of it. So same camera match, just a different way of looking at the point cloud data.
Is this another police photo?
That's correct.
What is it of?
This is approaching the front door of Miss Lawrence's residence.
About this?
This is that same photograph with lens distortion corrected. So we're viewing that photograph inside the 3D modeling software, 3D Studio Max. And now you can see the point cloud that's been overlaid on the photograph. So this is the camera match.
What is this?
This is a resulting 3D model. So we also created a 3D model of the interior of the residence and some of the exterior as well, based on that same LiDAR data collected, as well as camera matching photogrammetry.
So was this created through your computer program?
That's correct.
And so is this the digital model of the site?
Yep, this is geometric model in the computer model inside of 3D Studio Max.
What is this?
This is another photograph of the front door of Miss Lawrence's residence.
What is this?
This is that same photograph with lens distortion correction.
What is this?
This is the point cloud overlay on top of that photograph showing the camera match.
And once you camera matched it, what did you do?
So this is the three-dimensional model, again, created from the 3D LiDAR data And this just shows the consistency in alignment between the 3D model and the photograph.
And what is this?
This is, again, the 3D model. This is a view of it with shaded materials on it. You can also see the bullet defect or bullet hole in the door, and how we're able to place that or solve for its location in the three-dimensional environment using camera matching photogrammetry.
Is this another police photograph?
Yes.
What is it of?
This is looking essentially from the front door towards the interior of Miss Lawrence's residence.
And what is this?
This is the same photograph, again with lens distortion correction.
So when you say lens distortion correction, are you talking about the reason that it's black on the outsides? Is that what that's doing?
That's correct. So lenses will have some amount of curvature to them typically. A good example of this that I'm sure you've seen from an artistic standpoint would be a fisheye lens, where people take photographs and it's quite distorted, right? The horizon will have a significant bend to it oftentimes. In order for us to use photographs in camera matching photogrammetry, we have to solve for and correct for lens distortion. And once we've corrected for it, then it'll be useful from an alignment standpoint to the 3D point cloud.
So you can take a picture and change the lens distortion or get out of it in that software?
You can correct for it, that's right.
What is this?
So this is that same LiDAR point cloud. You've seen this previously with perhaps the voids that they've been described, or the areas where there's really no data collected. That's because furniture or something there was occluding the view of the scanner, blocking that data from being captured. So this shows the alignment of the LiDAR point cloud that was captured that's consistent from time of my inspection to time of incident.
What is this?
This is the three-dimensional model overlaid again on top of that photograph, showing the camera match and the consistency between the model and the photograph.
What is this?
This is the same three-dimensional model. This is a shaded view. You can see the location of the couch, Miss Lawrence's furniture, the table, the chairs, and this, I believe, is a freezer here in the foreground.
And is this another police photograph?
That's correct.
What is this?
This is the same photograph, again, within the three-dimensional environment.
What about this?
This shows the point cloud overlay, so the areas that we've camera matched from the point cloud to the photograph itself.
What is this?
Same point cloud. This is just the intensity view of getting grayscale.
What about this?
This is the wireframe geometry of that environment and the overlay on top of the photograph.
And this?
This is the shaded view of that same three-dimensional model on top of the photograph.
Is this a police photograph of the laser?
That's correct.
And what is this?
It's that same photograph inside the 3D modeling software with lens distortion correction.
What about this?
This image shows the point cloud overlay.
What about this?
So in this image, we're showing not only the location of the furniture, again, the freezer, the chair that's visible on the couch that define the three-dimensional environment, but we're also solving for evidence. In this case, the laser trajectory that was placed by police at the scene. We're now locating that in the three-dimensional environment using camera matching photogrammetry as well.
And is that the red thing that
Yes.
in that photo?
So it's a green laser in the original photograph. In this image, we're representing it with a red line or red geometry.
And what is this?
This is a shaded view of that three-dimensional environment with the laser trajectory.
What about this photo?
So this is another photograph from the police with the laser trajectory.
And what is this?
This is that same photograph inside the three-dimensional environment with lens distortion correction
And what is this?
and with point cloud overlaid on top of that image.
And this?
And then this shows the same idea but from a different angle as the previous photograph. So again, we're solving for the location of different furniture. So you can see the wireframe geometry that's overlaying the photograph, representing the location of the table, the chairs, the freezer, as well as physical evidence placed at this scene. The laser trajectory, we're solving for its location and orientation here in the scene using this photograph. It's represented in red inside the three-dimensional model.
And what about this?
This is that red geometric representation of the laser trajectory inside the 3D model.
Did you, you mentioned that you also did models of the people involved,
That's correct.
and how did you do that?
So those models are created based on information I had. So I met with Miss Lawrence, and again, I photographed her, and I took 3D laser scans similar to what you saw of the interior of the residence. I did 3D scans of Miss Lawrence. And then for Miss Owens, her, as well as Miss Lawrence, they're based on photographs from the time of incident and body-worn camera footage for their clothing. And then Miss Owens, the autopsy was also used to understand her overall height or dimensions.
What is this?
This is a photograph I took of Miss Lawrence.
And how tall was she?
She's 5'5".
How much did she weigh at the time that you met with her?
I don't recall how much she weighed at that time. I'm sorry.
And what is this?
This is the LiDAR point cloud of Miss Lawrence. So this is based on 3D scan data I collected when I visited Miss Lawrence.
What is this?
This is a three-dimensional model of Miss Lawrence that we created based on that LiDAR data.
And does the information on the thing that says Susan Lawrence, height 5'5", weight 180, is that information that you gathered at the time?
No, that's, yes, some of that is from the time. So the 5'5" is consistent with both the incident report as well as the LiDAR data and the photographs I took when I met with Miss Lawrence. The weight is based on the incident report.
Okay. So the weight was not at the time that you met with her, but it's the date, the weight that she was at the time of the incident.
That's correct.
And what is this?
This is the resulting three-dimensional model of Miss Lawrence on the right. On the left, you can see an image from a police body-worn camera that was used as a reference for creating that model and the clothing that she was wearing from the time of incident.
And who is this?
This is Miss Owens, three-dimensional model of her on the right.
What is the information in the middle?
So those are body-worn camera images. So this is taken from the investigating officers and the body-worn camera video. Those images were used as a reference for understanding what Miss Owens was wearing at the time of the incident, her clothing.
And you mentioned gathering autopsy data, is that correct?
Yeah, so I also referenced the autopsy report as well as photographs and radiology images.
Are those from the autopsy report?
Yes, so the text on this image is from the autopsy report describing her injuries, as well as the diagram in the middle, and then photographs on the right.
What's that bottom photograph?
So that's a radiology image showing Miss Owens. In this image, you can also see the bullet where it was located at the time. This image was captured on kind of her left side, if you will.
So did you take all of those images and all of those measurements and all of those pictures and put them all together to create your 3D computer model of the scene and the people?
Yes.
And did you consult with any other experts in developing this 3D computer model?
Yes.
Who was that?
I also consulted with ballistic expert Mr. Ray.
And did you work independently or in collaboration with Mr. Ray?
Both.
So tell me what you did independent of him.
So independently, I did the work that was kind of previously described through this presentation. So capturing the data myself at the scene, using it for camera matching photogrammetry, creating an accurate model, including the location of physical evidence there inside the three-dimensional model. Three-dimensional models, including wound locations for Miss Owens, but three-dimensional models for both Miss Owens and Miss Lawrence. And then from a collaboration standpoint,
Yeah, what did you, was
Sorry.
that all that you did independently?
yes,
Okay.
I believe so.
Then what did you do in collaboration with Mr. Ray?
So from a collaboration standpoint, I worked with Mr. Wright to establish where Miss Lawrence was at the time of shot, her position such that it would be consistent with physical evidence from that laser trajectory, as well as the cartridge casing that was found on the countertop in the kitchen. and Miss Owens' position outside of the residence, such that her position would be consistent with her wound path and physical evidence based on Mr. Wright's ballistic expertise.
And then did you prepare some photographs of the 3D computer model?
Some images, yes.
What is this?
So this is an image of, or a three-dimensional diagram. This is an orthographic side view, sometimes referred to as an elevation view. You can see the door, or the front door of the residence is on the left. You can see some of the exterior with the fence there. You can see the freezer, the chairs, and a dining room table in their location where they were at the time of the incident.
What about this?
So this is a placement of that laser trajectory as determined through camera matching photogrammetry.
And I notice it went back to green. Is this the exact same angle and all that from the police?
Yeah, sorry if there's any confusion there. It was green. It was a green laser in the photographs from the police. I used red geometry to help define and show how it was camera matched and located. And then I'm representing it here in green inside the model.
What is this?
This is a position, again, that was worked with Mr. Wright in collaboration. It's also consistent with Ms. Lawrence's statement as to where she was standing at the time of the shot. So this image is of that same environment with all the same furniture locations, but now it incorporates Ms. Lawrence in a position consistent with physical evidence at time of shot.
And what is this?
Same image again. Now we're incorporating Miss Owens into this image and her position such that it's consistent again with physical evidence and with Miss Lawrence's testimony.
Now, can you tell me what this is showing us?
Yes.
Starting off, why don't you start off with is the green line still the same laser that we've been talking about?
That's correct. So that's, and it's labeled in this image as police trajectory. So that's the laser trajectory that was placed by the crime scene personnel at the time of incident.
And then I see a blue dotted cone. What is that?
So that cone represents a plus or minus 5 degree or for a total of 10 degree cone that was placed at the direction of Mr. Wright, ballistic expert Mr. Wright. That cone represents a range of possible or an area of possible locations where the shot was fired from.
And I noticed that there's also a yellow line. What is the yellow line?
The yellow line represents the three-dimensional model and the location where Miss Lawrence was at the time of shot in our model, again, consistent with the ballistic evidence. So it's inside of that plus or minus 5 degree cone here. It's also connected to the bullet hole in the door, and then her position inside the model consistent with the cartridge case.
So I noticed that the yellow line is not all the way at the bottom of the 10 degree cone. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so that position is not as far down as could have been still within the cone. Is that right?
That's correct. It could be a little bit lower. It could be a little bit higher.
What is this?
So this is that same three-dimensional environment with objects located through camera matching photogrammetry, including that freezer by the front door. You see the chairs and the table. This is, again, like a plan view or a top-down view.
What is this?
This is that same image, but with the addition of a 3D laser. So this is the green laser as documented by the police.
And what is this?
This is that same sequence. So here you can see Miss Lawrence in a position where she, consistent with physical evidence, where she would have shot.
And what about this one?
This image includes Miss Owens' position.
Miss Lawrence or Miss Owens?
Miss Owens.
So it has both people?
That's correct.
And are these just the top-down views that we've just seen from the side? Like the last?
Yeah, it is the same sequence of images that you were just looking at from an elevation or side view. Now we're looking at it from a top-down or plan view.
Okay. And what is this?
So this has the same 10-degree cone incorporated into the 3D model again based on the direction of ballistic expert Mr. Wright. And it shows Miss Lawrence in a position near the kitchen table or dining room table.
All right. What is a visualization?
So a 3D visualization could be used to describe a number of different things. Again, from just a standpoint of a 3D model, you could have a single image of it. It could be a 3D environment. In this case, it's a recreation or reenactment, I should say, of events based on Miss Lawrence's recollection of events.
So did you create a visualization to depict Miss Lawrence's recollection of events?
That's correct.
And was that recollection consistent with all the physical evidence?
Yes.
The visualization was? Sorry, not the recollection. Was the visualization consistent with all the physical evidence?
Yes.
May I have hers real quick?
Yes, ma'am? Yes, ma'am?
I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as defense exhibit G. Do you recognize it?
I do.
How do you recognize it?
This is a DVD of the.
Not what is it, but how do you recognize it?
How do I recognize it? My apologies. This is. I have my initials on it. I have seen this DVD.
And what is it?
It is the 3D visualization that was created for this incident.
And is the visualization you created a fair and accurate representation of the recollection of events?
Yes.
And I think you mentioned previously, but is the positioning of Ms. Owens and Ms. Lawrence shown in the visualization at the time the shot was fired consistent with all of the physical evidence in this case?
Yes.
At this time, defense would move what's been marked for identification as G, I believe, as defense 10.
Any objection of board aye?
Your Honor, I have no objection to the visualization being shown to the jury as a demonstrative aid.
Do you have an objection to being placed into evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
What's the nature of the objection?
Your Honor, maybe we may approach.
Sure. Overrule the objection. Allow unanimous as defense number 10. Yes, ma'am?
Did you do anything else in this case?
I don't believe so.
Again, that visualization that we just watched, was that consistent with all of the physical evidence and everything that you reviewed in this case?
Yes.
And was it consistent with the opinion of ballistics expert Mr. Wright?
Yes.
No further questions. Oh, do you want?
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. If we could have the state's podium. Please.
If what?
The state's desk. I use media from the state's desk.
Okay.
I believe we're ready. Good morning, Mr. Turford.
Morning.
So this computer animation that you made and that we just viewed, there was a part in there where the door goes inward, correct? A little bit?
Yes.
That door, you never tested the door, you never inspected the door, correct?
That's correct. To my knowledge, the door was unavailable for inspection.
And then you never recorded anyone banging on the door that was shot through in this case, correct?
That's correct.
So you never took any measurements of anybody banging on the door in this case, correct?
That's correct.
And you're basing this whole computer animation based on a lot on the recollection of the defendant's events, correct?
I'm sorry, but
You're basing a lot of this computer animation on the defendant's recollection of events, correct?
yes, that was certainly a consideration when creating the visualization.
But you have no idea how much force will be required to move this door inwardly, do you?
Again, the door wasn't available for my inspection.
So the answer would be no, correct?
That's correct.
And you have no college degree in physics, correct?
That's correct.
And you're being paid, I think, $280 an hour, correct, in this case?
That's correct.
And I believe you've put in probably more than 50 hours in this case, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
All right. Is there a much more than 50? Do you know?
I don't know my total hours for this case.
Okay. So 280, and we'll just say at least 50. That's probably about $14,000, correct? You've been paid to do your work in this case.
That sounds correct. I don't know.
You've been paid $14,000 to create a computer animation that you took some artistic liberty in making that door go inwardly, correct?
So I don't know about artistic liberty, but it is consistent with the recollection of Miss Lawrence.
Now, I would also point out that you believe that this computer animation is consistent with the recollection of Miss Lawrence's events, right? You've said that, I think, multiple times.
Her recollection of the events, yes.
And in that computer animation, we just saw the firearm that is fired by the computer animation was pretty high, correct?
Yes, you could say it's high.
Would you say that firearm was probably over Miss Lawrence's head, correct?
I would say it's somewhere near the top of her head, yes.
Okay, so this is an accurate computer animation, correct?
Yes, it is. In terms of the 3D site reconstruction, and yes.
I'd like to show you a clip of Miss Lawrence's actual recollection of events, sir.
Okay, how were you holding the gun when you fired it? With two hands?
Yeah.
Now, Miss Lawrence's recollection of events, holding the gun with two hands like this, is directly inconsistent with your computer animation up here, correct?
I would also say she wasn't sitting like she is in this video frame, but and from a directly inconsistent, I mean, it's consistent with her recollection of where she was standing, and it's consistent with physical
That was a good
evidence.
question, sir. Now, sir, I want to move on to the computer animation. It's not a representing accurate timing of event, correct?
Correct.
All right. It's not a accurate representation of the entire sequence of events, is it correct?
Well, I'm sorry, what do you mean by entire sequence?
Yeah, this computer animation doesn't reflect the entire sequence of events, does it?
No, I wouldn't say it does.
And there were some things that were left out in this computer animation, correct?
I don't know what you're referring to, sorry.
Well, you didn't include the defendant calling 911 before Advocate even came to the door, did you?
That's correct.
All right, and you did not include the defendant in the bathroom walking out to the front door and finding out that Advocate was the one banging on the front door, did you?
That's correct.
And you didn't include the defendant, once the banging on the door happened, walking all the way back into the bathroom and washing her hands. You never included that, did you?
No, that is not a part of the visualization.
And then you never included the defendant walking into the kitchen after leaving the bathroom and washing her hands, did you? Or the baker's door.
That is also not a part of that visualization.
And you didn't include the defendant then walking all the way back into her bedroom and grabbing not the .22 but the Remington 380 pistol, and then walking all the way back out to the front door and holding the gun like this and shooting, did you?
That is also not a part of the visualization, no.
And sir, you have no medical expertise, do you?
That's correct.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
Briefly. Mr. Smith asked you about Ms. Lawrence holding the weapon. Is that on cross?
Yes.
And he played a clip from Ms. Lawrence's interview with the police.
Yes.
And in that clip, it showed her kind of making a gesture, holding her hands together.
Yes.
And your visualization also shows her with both hands together on the gun. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Nothing else.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Is he excused?
Yes.
Sure, you're excused. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're taking a short break. I know we've ordered food. I want to find out when your food is coming. I think it was ordered to be hot food this time. So I'm going to be a little more precise on when you get it. So we'll take a short break and I'll get an update on your lunch and then we'll go from there, okay? Thank you. Please put your notebooks down. All right, we'll take a short break. I'm going to check on their lunch. The jurors outside the courtroom will be in recess.
Let's see. Does the restaurant call us when they're ready or something? Well, that's not what they don't want you to do. So there's no incentive working. That works. Both ones works.
Yeah.
Okay, so they bring it here. Oh, okay, okay. Okay. I was just wondering whether. Yeah. Yeah, I think Caroline told him 1:45. That's Hodges said it was 11:45. So.
No,
Yeah.
against advice.
Yeah.
As honestly as
Yeah, I didn't know if we have. I thought we had to go pick it up or something.
Sir.
They bring it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already got the receipt. Got the receipt yesterday.
No, that's not a death case. It's a second degree. And like, yeah. I started that case when I was there. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, it was in Clearfield.
Oh.
What's that?
Oh,
And short antenna.
is that gonna make it any worse?
They said that antenna wasn't even made for that radio.
Then why would they?
Well, we were talking about percentage in the contract and all that stuff. He said, I don't know, he said this is a single band radio, but that antenna is a triple band antenna. So they got the single band antennas, and which are shorter. So they fly the radio. There's all that stuff.
Maybe that's why they keep falling off.
And then, so he's gonna, I just happened to see him with the flashlight. He gave, but he's gonna come over and give everybody the new. Yeah, the plastic, ripped off my business.
How did that do that? It either sits here or sure.
But, so he's in there. Couple, I said he's, you brought all the old radio filters back, remember? The box up there. Who'd you give them? Because they have on record that bus train. He says he doesn't, it's still showing that we have all the, so I said, I'm almost positive Roman took them because you came to me.
Was it big?
Yeah. So I collected them all, and then you can go on and lights, and you bought that.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's coming over here in the next week or week and come to it. He said he's not going to do it. Yeah, it's just more secure too. Yeah. It's like it's like.
Never had really a problem.
No, that one for us is not the problem. I wouldn't trust that one to control.
Yeah.
It's the clip. Yeah.
Are you back?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You should have checked in.
I'll show you that.
He checked it with Kyle.
Hey.
Yeah, just take a look out. I don't know why. So I have one more. Two done. I got these.
So one more. I think that.
Walking in on the Yeah, after 3 days. Yeah, my whole, yesterday, this whole part just all between the part.
Did he say they had one?
He was checking to see if it was here. Is it?
I just think it's caught up in the city of chairs and stuff, it gets a little bit, little by little. But Streamline wasn't, but Streamline, they said, they'll turn my
I was just talking to Rich about it.
body,
And I'm so sad.
flashlight, and Streamline.
I just want to sleep without looking up in hair.
Have a problem if you say
Man, I was so looking forward to seeing tomorrow. Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah. I did not, I thought we had to meet or something, when they delivered or something.
Yeah, there's-
Apparently told 11:45.
Yeah, because that's the whole meeting.
Okay.
Well, I mean, well,
They'll call one of us, because they normally call me.
Right.
usually they just blend it just because of my number. So it's, so Brigham, his trial, no changes of the trial priority, that's at 1 month. Max said he couldn't do that. He said that he told some to come back at 4. He said he told some to come back at 3 and some to come back at 4. Hello? All right, I'll have somebody out there to meet you. Sierra 53-6, I need somebody to meet from the backyard to the back door, bring the jury north to
Let's bring her out and then I'll just tell the jury what the schedule's going to be. So you guys have at least one more witness out here, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And then
Yes, sir.
we'll figure out whether Ms. Lawrence wants to testify or not.
Yes, Your Honor.
And so I think that given the amount of time you guys want to use for closing, that it'd probably be best to close tomorrow morning.
Yes, sir.
So what I'm going to do is come in, let the jurors know what the schedule's going to be like, so they can be prepared for the fact that if the closings take most of the morning, then they'll probably be in deliberation in the afternoon, and they need to understand they can't have phones with them, so that all their family know nobody can contact them while they're doing deliberations, and they are all prepared for all that. That'll give them the appropriate amount of time to deliberate on the case, and we'll go from there, okay?
Yes,
So
sir.
I think your lunch is just about here, so I'll just go have them eat lunch. How much time do you guys need for lunch?
However long you tell us, Your Honor. An hour's fine.
I'll give the clerk an hour.
We don't need to eat.
You know what?
I got them through like a whole hour?
Have I ever given you less than an hour?
Yeah, I've only taken 30 minutes.
Not me.
I know, you get the whole thing, you get to walk out and go.
No, but I've always given you at least an hour.
I don't know.
Right. I'm not saying about other. I'm not saying have other judges given you less than an hour. I've never given you less than a
You
full.
have never given me less than an hour, you're not right.
So I'll give you. I mean, if you need a little bit more than an hour, I'll give you what you need.
But I'm good with whatever you
All
do.
right. So we'll give you everyone an hour, and that'll be good. We'll say 11:45 to 12:45. How about that?
Okay.
So, I'm not talking about what the other people in the hall do. Don't worry about them. So,
You ready?
yes, ma'am. I gotta do warrants at lunch anyway, so. All right, ladies and gentlemen, don't get too comfortable because your lunch is here. And so I want to make sure it gets to you before it cools down. I think the bailiff is down there right now picking it up and bringing it up here. I just want to let you know what the schedule is going to be like. We'll have at least an hour for lunch. After that, we'll have some witnesses in the afternoon. And then I'm going to release you for the day because then we'll have our closing arguments tomorrow morning. All right. Given the possible length of closing arguments, if I did it today, you would be getting the case very late, and I want to make sure you have the appropriate amount of time to deliberate on the case, okay? So most likely the closings will take a lot of the morning tomorrow, but then you'll have plenty of time to deliberate on the case. Keep in mind that when you're deliberating, you can't have your phones with you. So if you need an emergency number, let us know, we can give it to you. Otherwise, we're going to live just like the 1980s, no cell phones for at least a couple of hours. And maybe that life is better, I don't know. But otherwise, enjoy your lunch. Remember, you can't discuss the case yet. And we'll see you in a little over an hour, okay? Thank you. We'll be adjourned until 12:45.
Yes, I think yes.
Real deep depression. I mean, they have more of an understanding of what has happened and perhaps are now moving towards system 2. The parasympathetic nervous system is starting to take over, and you're starting to have a contemplative recollection of events, and that can move you into depression. So there's no right way to act after a situation has occurred. It varies.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Are all of the opinions that you have shared with the court and jury today within a reasonable degree of scientific and use of force analysis certainty?
They are.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you, Don.
Thank you, sir. Do you want this slide up or no?
Yes. Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You are not a licensed psychologist, correct?
I am not.
Nor are you a licensed psychiatrist?
No.
Not a medical doctor?
No.
And you've never counseled or treated patients in a psychological or psychiatric setting?
I have not.
The majority of your life has been involved in law enforcement?
Yes.
And you've actually developed some unique products that law enforcement officers use in their everyday duties, right?
I have, yes.
Your master's degree is in educational psychology, right?
It is, yes.
And you received that degree, I believe, in 2014.
Yes.
That degree came from the Department of Education, not the Department of Psychology, correct?
That's right.
And you basically went back to school to try to get a better understanding of how to better train law enforcement officers, right?
Well, to train everyone, I think. At that point, I was already, as I told you, I started as a self-defense instructor. But to understand what happened, why people behave the way they do under stress, that was my big question, why I went back to school.
Would you agree that people have to make split-second decisions every day?
I suppose some people do. I don't know if everyone does.
For instance, I'll give you an example that probably everybody in this room has experienced at some point. I'm driving down the road, and the car ahead of me slams on its brakes, and I then have a split-second decision to make.
Yes.
Okay, I have to decide, do I have enough time to hit my brakes to avoid making contact with the car ahead of me?
You generally won't make that decision. That'll be an automatic response.
Okay. Would I also have to, well, depending on how much time I have, right?
How much time you have, that's right. If it's way down the road, then yes, you can contemplate it. But if they slam on their brakes so that it has a meaningful effect, oftentimes the automaticity of your actions will take over. That system 1 we talked about, it will engage. You won't be working off system 2.
And that system's going to help me decide, do I hit my brakes to try to avoid? Do I swerve right? Do I swerve left into the oncoming traffic? Or if I have nowhere to go, I just got to hit the brakes and try to minimize the damage?
If you have the time to do it, yes.
Okay. And the brain makes all of those decisions in a split second, does it not?
Well, not if you're contemplating. If you're contemplating, it could be the course of several seconds, and depending on how much time. I mean, if you're a radar operator with something coming in, it could be several minutes, could be an hour. So the process, once again, varies given the context of the danger, I suppose.
And the immediacy of the danger.
The immediacy of the danger will be a system 1 response.
That situation I just described could be considered a very stressful situation, could it not?
Sure.
It could create a high anxiety.
Yes.
If you make the wrong decision, you could be seriously injured or seriously injure somebody else.
I would think so.
And people are put in those positions every day, are they not?
Again, yes, I don't know what people you mean. I think the context matters. If you stay home all day reading books, I don't know how many opportunities you have to be placed in high stressful situations. But it is quite common that individuals are forced to make some type of split decision on a daily basis.
Now, obviously, the more time that I have between seeing this immediate threat ahead of me, this car slamming on its brakes, the better ability I have to react.
I would say yes.
And the better ability I have to make a better, more reasoned and informed decision.
Yes.
If I have 50 feet or 5 seconds to react to this car slamming its brakes on ahead of me, I have a better ability to react than I have if I have an immediate threat and I have 10 feet and a half a second to react.
Well, it depends on, I would say that's true, but it depends on the speed you're traveling as well,
Sure.
of course.
Is that similar to the concept of the signal detection theory that you described earlier?
Kind of. So you're talking about almost an economic model of decision making, like I can swerve or I can hit my brakes or I can go off to the curb. Those are picking the best answer between multiple versions of response that you have time to contemplate. Signal detection theory does offer that, but remember that the whole point is uncertainty. In other words, you don't have an answer on what to do. You're not really certain about what to do. So in the backdrop of uncertainty, or when you're trying to decide something is, you're not looking at brake lights coming on. You're trying to decide something unknown. It's a different experience, because what you're having to do is make decisions based on what you don't know, not based on what you do know. You're answering, or to answer your question, knowing that the brake lights come on is something you know.
But you don't know what is going to happen if I choose to swerve right or left or hit the brake. Do I have enough?
Well, I think you calculate what will happen, and I think that's fair. But again, the signal detection theory is based on uncertainty. I just don't know what I'm looking at or looking for. I'm leaning in one direction or the other, and this is why the SDT, I'll call it shortly, is based on what we call liberal and conservative bias, because there's that error component in the prediction level.
When you touched on this earlier, that in a situation where there is stress or anxiety, there's an adrenal response.
Yes.
Okay. And basically adrenaline kicks in and it floods the body and the brain.
Yes.
Okay. It makes your lungs work more efficiently.
Yes.
It causes blood vessels to send more blood to your muscles.
The blood shifts around the bodies based on where it's needed, but it may go to your muscles, some may go to the viscera. And this is done through the changes in blood vessels and capillaries.
And that's why we see some people do like amazing feats of strength in those situations.
Yes.
It also sends more blood to your brain.
Yes.
And that causes the brain to become more alert and focused, does it not?
Oftentimes, yes.
It is that rush of adrenaline that helps the brain make that split-second decision to know what to do when that car ahead of you slams its brakes on.
I'm sorry, repeat your question.
It's that rush of adrenaline that causes my brain to be able to make that split-second decision to react to the car ahead of me.
Right. If it's a high arousal, then it's going to be automatized. So system 1 will engage, and it will be because of the physiological and psychological changes that you're undergoing.
So often I do that without even thinking about it.
Well, it's automatized. You never think about it. That's the description of system 1.
Would you agree, take my situation, if I am an experienced driver, been driving for 30 years of my life, I am better equipped to assess this car ahead of me, assess the immediate threat in front of me, and make a good decision.
Yes, that's true.
I'm better equipped in that position than I am if I was a 15-year-old driver who has driven twice in my life and didn't know what to do.
Most certainly.
So your age, your life experiences factor into your ability to make a good decision.
Well, depending on whether it's a novel event or not, right? I mean, so there are some things that you've never seen before. It doesn't matter if you're 15 or 50. So, for example, if no one's ever pulled a gun on you, you may not know what to do. There's no blueprint for that. So your novel decision making is just as green as a 15-year-old who has also never had a gun pulled on him. But to your driving example, once again, the assumption is if you're 50 and driving, you've probably braked a lot. You've probably had these situations occur all the time. And if you're 15, you haven't. So in that case, these are not novel situations. These are repeat situations that you formulated a plan for, and they become automatized over time.
Even people with general life experiences have experienced different forms of stress, different forms of anxiety, different forms of threats, right?
I'm not sure what you're asking me exactly. Different forms, they appraise them differently. So again, it's not necessarily what the threat is, it's how you appraise it, right? So if you and I are standing next to each other and I got a gun and you don't, and I get attacked by a bear, I'm in a better position to make a decision to engage than you are, because I have the coping mechanism for that situation. So my appraisal might be that this bear is a challenge. Yours is no, it's a threat. You're up a tree, I'm standing there shooting at the bear. So given the same stimulus, that can be appraised very, very differently. And that is precisely what we do. We are constantly calculating our ability to manage a stimulus. And if we can manage it, once again, it is considered just a challenge. But if we can't manage it, it becomes a threat. And this is where arousal starts to see a drop off in performance.
And would you agree that general life experiences gives an older person a better ability to manage situations because they've seen situations differently and more often and in different contexts than a 15-year-old?
It's probably an empirical question. I don't know if that's been tested. I mean, there's this thing called near and far transfer. So if you do things similar to something else, you have what are called near transfers. If you do things that are way different, then you have far transfers. How those things affect novel situations, I'm not exactly sure.
You also mentioned something in your direct examination that when talking about maybe prior difficulties with somebody that future behavior is
Future behavior is predicted on past behavior, yeah.
Okay.
And again, it may not be exactly predicted because it's random, right? So one event doesn't necessarily have any relation to the other one. But our perception of past events is what directs our decision-making in future events.
You charge $300 an hour, correct?
Yes.
And about how many hours have you devoted to this case so far?
I don't know, probably 15, 17.
Okay. All right, one moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You redirect?
Yes, sir, thank you. Since Mr. Buffin asked you, tell us, what is educational psychology exactly? Oh, you're good.
So when I went back to school, I already had a whole career behind me as a law enforcement officer, and my interest in further study going to graduate school was to learn about how stress affected individuals, because what we were seeing in the field is that people weren't performing the way we were teaching them to perform. I thought at first perhaps I would find the answer in military studies or something like that, but as I did further investigation, what I found out is this idea of anxiety and stress is most profound in sport psychology, sport exercise and performance. Why is that? Because we don't have people in lab coats standing on the battlefield. We don't have people in lab coats standing, in the neighborhoods when the police show up. But we do have people with lab coats in the laboratory working with athletes. We have them on the gridiron. We have them on the diamond. And they're seeing how people perform when they get very high levels of stress. We just had the Olympics, great example. You see people, we call it choking under stress. And so all of that data is found in educational psychology, not clinical psychology. I wasn't interested in working with people who were unwell, people who had disorders. I was interested in working with people who were very well, like champion athletes, police officers, SWAT team members, Navy SEALs, things like that. So I drifted towards educational psychology over clinical psychology because I think it's far more relevant in understanding the issues that I talk about.
Mr. Buxman spent a lot of time with you talking about an individual slamming their brakes in that situation. What is the difference between an individual under a stressful situation where, they have to slam their brakes to not die, to not get in an accident, to not damage their vehicle or something else? What is the difference between that type of stress and the type of stress that you see in use of force analysis and how that affects your decision-making process?
Well, a lot of times in use of force, not always, but a lot of times the decision is terminal. It's not just going off into the ditch and having to call AAA, but it's actually terminal. In other words, if you don't make the right decision, you can die or perhaps kill someone else. So, unfortunately, I would say that we don't have a lot of information, empirically speaking, on how people exactly behave when they're under this this type of arousal, because you can't shoot at people and see what they do. But we do have a lot of information from the field, from law enforcement, from the military about those things. And so it's sort of a separate category from the everyday events that you see, like driving your car. That's not the kind of arousal. You don't get as aroused as, for example, somebody sticking a gun in your face and threatening to kill you. So they're viewed slightly differently than everyday events. The idea that you have to make split decisions, can be whether or not you decide to send your camper child off to camp or not. That might be a split decision that you make as part of a heuristic. But there are certainly different gradients of these split decisions, and I usually deal with the most extreme.
So it's apple and oranges.
I'd say they're relative. I don't know if they're apples and oranges. They're both fruit, we'll say that. And, they're certainly different kind of fruit.
Different types of fruit.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Buxman spent some time speaking to you about general life experiences, but it depends on the type of experiences that an individual has, right?
Yes.
And statistically, do a lot of people have experience in a use of force analysis?
Analysis, no, or do you mean the use of force situation?
I'm sorry, use of force situation.
They really don't. I mean, considering the number of the amount of violence that we have in this country, I think is well known. But we have a lot of people in this country too. So the statistics of it break down to very, very few people having any experience with violence, and even fewer with deadly violence.
Okay. If I may have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
No further questions. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions?
Can I have one more, Your Honor?
Sure.
No questions, Your Honor.
Is he excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Have a nice day, sir.
Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I'll let you know where we're going from here, okay? Thank you. All right, the jury is out of the courtroom. Are there any other additional witness for the defense?
No, sir.
All right. Ms. Lawrence, have you discussed with your attorneys the decision regarding whether or not you will testify or not?
Yes, I have.
Do you need any additional time to discuss that decision with them?
No,
Have they forced you to make a decision in any way?
no,
Have you made a decision on your own?
yes, I have.
Can you tell us what that decision is?
I am not going to testify.
You've made that decision freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to bring the jurors back in, and then you want to rest with the jurors?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I'll do is, it's 1:30 now. I'm going to tell them that, given the schedule, and the length of closing arguments that everyone has suggested there may be, that it would be too late to send them out this afternoon, because honestly, they'd be going out conservatively at 4:30, maybe later. And I don't want to put any sort of pressure on them to make a decision fast or slow. So what we'll do is I'll let them go for the afternoon, and then we'll start tomorrow morning. You told me you think a couple hours for yours?
Judge, I'm going to try my best to maybe get it to an hour and a half.
I'm not going to limit anybody, because of the nature of the case, there's no reason to limit anybody. I always caution people, going too long can sometimes be detrimental. Going too short can be detrimental. So please just try to govern yourselves accordingly.
Yes, sir.
If you need the boards, let me know ahead of time, and I'll be happy to turn them on for you.
I will
Any
need it.
evidence you need, make sure you have that available to you.
Yes, sir.
If there's anything else you need, please let me know. So I'll bring them back in, and then I'll let them go for the evening, and we'll have them here. What time do you guys want to start tomorrow morning?
9 a.m. is fine.
Okay. I mean, like I said, I'm on duty, so I have a few things to do in the morning before I come in court, and I do stuff during lunch. But luckily, duty ends at noon for me tomorrow. So, a week of being on call. Nevertheless, I'll just inform them of the schedule. That means they'll probably be going into deliberation sometime around lunch. I'll give them plenty of time to make a decision. And I'll let them know that, hey, while you're deliberating, no one can contact you. But also let them know that they can take as long as they want in deliberations. It's up to them completely. All right? So that's the only instructions I'll give them. But you want to rest before that, right? You want to rest now?
Yes.
Okay. Bring him back.
Not sure if the court mentioned it this morning, but for the record, Ms. Lawrence is uncuffed, wearing the same type of civilian clothing that she has.
Yeah, she's been in civilian clothing the entire trial.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You don't have any hands cuffs or leg cuffs on? Okay, thank you.
I'm just freezing. That's right.
You cold?
I'm freezing.
All right. We always try to keep a little cool. You'd be surprised how hot it is to try a case. So it's always better to be cool.
You don't have to feel too bad. I've got multiple sweaters.
Okay. Ms. Sizemore?
Yes, Judge. The defense rests.
I take it there's no rebuttal?
No rebuttal, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, both the state and the defense have now rested their cases. So what we're going to do is go into a recess until tomorrow afternoon. The reason we're going to a recess now is because of the time that it may take for the parties to present their closing arguments, and for me to give you the instructions means you wouldn't be getting this case till very, very late in the afternoon. I don't want to put any pressure on you regarding how long you need to deliberate. When you deliberate the case, you'll have as long as you want, but I don't want to start at 5 o'clock p.m. Okay? So you should have it probably around lunchtime tomorrow, somewhere in that range, okay? Of course, even tomorrow, you can deliberate for as long as you want. We're just going to be starting a lot earlier for your convenience. I want to remind you that the case is not over, so you can't begin to deliberate at any point now. You still have to have the closing arguments and the instructions on the law. Once you hear all of that, you go back for the final time. You'll take your notebooks with you, and then you can begin to deliberate the case. You're still under the rule. Please don't let anyone say anything to you about this case. Please don't look up anything about this case. Please don't talk about this case at all. When you come in the morning, I'm going to give you each a number for you as a juror. So if any time during your deliberations you need to ask any sort of questions or anything else, you'll be identified by your number. Okay? It's going to be just like school. I'm going to hand you a piece of paper with your name and a number on it. And then you'll do everything by, say, juror number 2, what have you. But if you need an emergency number tomorrow morning in case you can't go 3 hours without a phone, or however long it may take, I don't want to say 3 hours, but however long it may take for delivery, please let us know and we'll provide a number to you. Okay? With that, you're excused for the day. Have a very nice day. Thank you. Leave your notebooks here, please. We will give you lunch as well tomorrow. Does anyone else have anything they need to address before we recess for today?
There was just one small error that I found in jury instructions, and I think we need to address a couple of things in it.
Okay. As I normally do, I will, once we finalize these, I'll explain to the jurors that I'll make a copy of the instructions for each of the jurors for them to have when they deliberate. As probably all of you are familiar with my practices, there'll be one set for the foreperson, and there's one verdict form, and then each of the other jurors has a set to help them discuss instructions while they deliberate. What is the error?
If you go to the excusable homicide in the very last paragraph, where it says, I now instruct you on the circumstances that must be proved before Susan Lawrence may be found guilty of manslaughter, and it has or any lesser included crime.
So I'll take out or any lesser included crime.
Hold on a second. Where is that?
Under excusable homicide.
I think it's page 5, Judge.
There's no numbers.
Oh.
Yeah.
Just count down 5 pages. Okay. Oh, on the introduction of homicide one?
Yeah, if you go to the
Okay,
last paragraph.
I now instruct in the circumstances must be proved before Susan Lawrence may be found guilty of manslaughter. You want a period after manslaughter.
Right, because there are no lesser included, and I don't want them to get confused.
No, I appreciate that. Did you read it out loud and find that, or?
I did.
See? What's that?
And then there's the little paragraph in italics. The defendant in this case has become a witness. You should apply the same rules. I think we need to take that out.
Right.
Taking that out.
And that is under
3.8.
3.9.
3.9.
3.9.
That'll be taken out, and we'll keep in 3.9A. Yes, ma'am?
Yes, yes, sir.
What else?
That was it.
Okay. So what we'll do, Mr. Smith, whoever sent me this copy, I think that was you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Send a copy to Ms. Sizemore, if that's who's getting it, whoever on the defense is getting it. And then once you guys tell me everyone's good on this, then I'll have Ms. Matthews make the copies.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And I appreciate it. Take these back. I'll be here for today. Thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank
nice
you,
day.
Judge.
Thank you.